Thwack! A loud meaty sound resounded through the square as Chromia stepped up and slammed her metal fist into the side of Muscle Lord's head. The muscle-headed player hadn't even seen her approach. Although, if Shaggy was being honest, he hadn't seen her either. He was more concerned about Slink, who was standing stock still as Mo, Larry, and Curly slithered their way out of his sleeves. Poor kid had logged right into a shitstorm. "Damn it, Jerry. Warn us before you kick things off," yelled a voice from behind Shaggy. Shaggy remembered Muscle Lord's friends and turned, but a gust of wind and the sound of an impact made him stumble backwards. Glancing around, he saw a yellow and black mass of blurry limbs rolling in the dirt. He was about to help Vlad when Muscle Lord's other friends attacked. He raised his claws as a player transformed into a dirt-covered golem and strode over to him. But again the attack was thwarted, this time by Dave, who slammed his blue-armored body straight into the other player. Laughing as he did. "Oh ho ho ho. PvP. Oh yeah, I got this one. He can help me toughen up my armor. Or maybe get me some skills. Hey. Do you know you can turn off those annoying notification things? I mean, I just found out." Dave continued to blather on as he lifted the golem player up and ran him into a nearby building. Shaggy sighed as he lowered his claws again. He saw several of their lackeys making their way toward the final two players. One was raising a wand above his head, and the other had drawn a damn claymore from his back. They were both waving them menacingly at the encroaching lackeys. Shaggy raised a hand and shouted, "Whoa! Hey, leave some for me, damn it! Why don't the rest of you all make space for Slink and Musclebrain's fight? Maybe take some bets and make sure that nothing gets damaged. All right?" The lackeys all looked at him and then back to the two players. Several lackeys grumbled and holstered their guns, while others lowered their melee weapons. The lackeys that had known him the longest nodded and walked away to follow his orders. The others formed a circle around the two players and waited. Shaggy gave another sigh and waved at the two players. "That looks like the best we're gonna get. You two ready to do this?" The magic user put down his wand and looked at his friend. The sword wielder nodded at Shaggy and lowered his stance. "You think that was a good idea?" asked the sword wielder. Shaggy shrugged his shoulders and raised his claws. "Probably not. But I'll be damned if I'm going to let any PvP happen around here without me taking part." Shaggy charged forward, claws extended as the player swung his big claymore in a wide arc. The blow was clumsy and Shaggy could tell it threw the other guy off balance. Shaggy raked his claws down the swordsman's thigh. Bright blood flowed over the guy's pants legs and Shaggy rushed by and aimed at the magic user next. The player had been standing there idly, apparently thinking that Shaggy was only going to fight them one at a time. But the wizard's reflexes were quick as he raised his wand back up and a bright blue streak of light flew at Shaggy. Shaggy ducked to the side to avoid the arcane missile, but the damn thing curved and slammed right into his leg. He felt his skin burn as the blue bolt hit him hard enough to stop his charge. The sound of footsteps behind him made Shaggy throw his body to the side. The swordsman's blow whizzed by his head as another bright light went off in his peripheral vision. Shaggy rolled on the ground until the swordsman was in front of his friend, but the blue bolt lurched around swordsman still coming for Shaggy. Shaggy grinned as the second bolt hit him in the chest and he felt his fancy armor absorb most of the blow. He could feel his healing, taking care of the bruising underneath the armor. His leg wound was also rapidly healing before everyone's eyes. The bolts weren't that powerful, but they were annoying. The swordsman quirked an eyebrow as the hole in Shaggy's leg healed as they all watched. Shaggy could hear the wizard sked in disappointment. "You're going to need the big guns on this one, Arnold," shouted the swordsman as rushed forward and stabbed. Even with a cut-up leg, the player was moving pretty well. So Shaggy ducked the blow and gave him another cut on the opposite leg as he rushed for the mage. The age-old rule of taking out the magic users first resounded in Shaggy's head. Another blue bolt hit him in the leg, but Shaggy ignored it as he charged with both claws forward. The mage danced back as Shaggy claws cleaved the air in front of him. Damn it, Otis. Keep aggro. Arnold shouted as he stumbled backward. Arnold, he's not an NPC, he's a player. He has no aggro. Otis shouted back. Shaggy could hear Otis' footsteps behind him again, but he grinned at Arnold and threw himself at the mage again, claws extended. Arnold went to dodge, but was slightly too slow as Shaggy came away with a chunk of the poor kid's shoulder. Shaggy heard Otis grunt, and then a sharp sting in his side. Looking down, he saw the blade of the large claymore embedded in his side. Huh. Got him. Arnold cheered while stumbling backwards. His shoulder was still bleeding heavily. Otis grunted again, and the blade came out of Shaggy's side. Shaggy grunted himself and turned, side already healing. Otis' eyes widened and he swore under his breath as Shaggy charged again. This time right at Otis. Not the time to cheer, Arnold. Otis screamed as he raised the flat of his sword to block Shaggy's claws. Shaggy felt his claws bounce off the side of the sword, and he followed up with another strike. Otis backpedaled as he hid behind his sword. Shaggy got as close to the other player as he could and tried to get around the sword. But Otis continued to play defense until Arnold shouted something Shaggy couldn't quite make out. Thinking it was a spell, he dive-rolled to the side and came up in time to see a spear made of ice planted where he had been standing. Shaggy growled, annoyed, but he had to dodge as Otis swung his claymore in another arc. Shaggy went for the player's guts this time as he ducked under the wide swing. He flung both hands upward at Otis' stomach but only felt his right-handed claws make it through whatever armor the player was wearing. Otis gave a shout in pain and jumped back, but Shaggy followed and raked his left-handed claws at his opponent's face. Otis went down screaming as Shaggy's claws went right across his eyes. Otis! Crepitus! Arnold gave a shout of alarm, followed by what Shaggy was sure was a spell. Shaggy dove away again as a loud explosion went off where he had been standing. Otis' body went flying as Shaggy shook the noise from his head. Arnold was standing a few yards away, mouth agape at hitting his friend with a spell. He shook off the shock quickly though as he threw an angry look at Shaggy. Look what you made me do. Shaggy shrugged his shoulders. Dude, you were the one that hit him with the spell. What was I gonna do? Stand there and take it? Arnold sputtered, but answered. But yes. With your healing, you could have taken that no problem. Doesn't mean I have to take every hit. My armor is already pretty low on durability from dying. I don't need to get it exploded. Shaggy argued. The mini-argument was interrupted as a yellow and black blur flew into the dirt between them. The blur dissipated as Vlad and a bright yellow alien stopped fighting and stepped back. Shaggy was surprised to see Vlad bleeding black from his nose. But the yellow speedster was also sporting a few puncture marks from Vlad's fingers. Amir. This guy killed Otis. Arnold whined at the yellow speedster. Hey. You're the one that exploded him. Shaggy shouted back. Amir looked at the slowly dissolving body of Otis before he turned back to the mage. Damn it, Arnold. What have we told you about friendly fire? Vlad took his moment to wipe the blood from his face as Arnold stamped the dirt angrily. It's not my fault none of you can dodge. Dude. Your friend was blind and bleeding from both legs. How was he going to dodge? Shaggy asked. You stay out of this, damn it. Next time, just take the damn hit. Arnold argued. How about you aim, Arnold? Amir shouted back. Turning to Shaggy, Amir said, sincerely. Seriously, kill him, please. Do us all a favor. Jerry's his dumbass friend, anyway. Hey. Shaggy grinned as he nodded. Sure thing. Vlad, you got this? Vlad exhaled tiredly before nodding. Yeah. I'm good. You ready, Banana Man? Amir chuckled and blurred again as Vlad turned into a black mist. The two collided, and the black and yellow blur rushed off again. Shaggy turned back to Arnold, who still looked annoyed at his friend. Shaggy cracked his neck and marched forward, claws up and ready. Arnold started to rapidly wave his wand in the air, drawing some kind of words in the air. Shaggy rushed forward, but Arnold completed whatever he was doing as a sheen of air appeared in front of him. He rebounded off the magical force field and barely caught himself as he stumbled back. Shaggy grunted in annoyance as Arnold looked smug. Protection ward, asshat. Good luck getting through that. Shaggy flexed his claws and smiled as he took his armor off and threw it in the dirt nearby. He closed his eyes and focused as his body twisted and he fell to all fours. His transformation had definitely gotten faster. He merely had to close and open his eyes and he was in his were form. He shook the lingering tingles from his bones and glared at Arnold. The player had a stupefied look on his face as Shaggy sauntered forward. Shaggy swatted a dense paw at the protection ward and felt it bend slightly at his strike. He quickly batted at the thing again as Arnold shook off his shock. The mage raised his wand and started muttering a spell. Shaggy felt the ward firm up as he clawed at the egg-like orb that was protecting Arnold. He could see the thing getting weaker and weaker with every hit though. He even turned and used his hind legs to kick the thing a few times as he watched Arnold start to sweat, then fall to his knees. Shaggy felt the orb fall as Arnold collapsed exhausted on his knees. Shaggy glared at Arnold before he snapped his head forward and bit down as hard as he could. That's not faurgk. Arnold started to say as Shaggy bit down on the player's head and chest. Shaggy felt blood seep down his lips before it transformed into motes of lights and disappeared along with Arnold's body. Shaggy could feel his tail wagging as he howled in triumph. Nearby people looked out of their doors and windows as a few lackeys cheered along with him. Shaggy saw a purple alien had picked up his armor and was looking at him pensively. She shook her head, showing she wasn't stealing it. She was about to put it down when Shaggy gave a short bark and waved his large head back toward the square. Shaggy's fight hadn't moved him that far from the square. But he and the lackeys that had stayed to watch his fight returned just in time to see Jerry, the muscle lord, fall to his knees. He was bleeding from several small wounds on his body as Chromia and Slink stood nearby. Slink was cradling a small green snake as Chromia glared down at Muscle Lord. Nearby, a dirt-covered Dave was excitedly talking to a few lackeys. The excited player was demonstrating some kind of punch combination as the lackeys watched in rapt attention. Shaggy could still see the black and yellow blur appear here and there around the square. It looked like every one of them had come out on top, except for Vlad. Shaggy made a mental note to give the vampire player shit about that later. Muscle Lord screamed in outrage from his kneeling position. Shaggy could see blood pouring out of the man's mouth as he roared. You damn cheating bastards. You used an NPC. I would have hooped your ass if this had been a fair fight. Muscle Lord whined. Slink rubbed the green snake on his arm as he answered. That's not much incentive for me to fight fair now, is it? Besides, my snake still helped her whoop your ass. Muscle Lord continued his tirade as Shaggy exhaled loudly. He trotted over to the kneeling player as he continued to ramble on. He was happy to see a lot of people in the square's shocked faces at a 6-foot-high wolf just come traipsing through their square. But he focused on the still shouting Muscle Lord as he leaned over and bit the big player's head off. A cascade of lights went up in the air, followed closely by loud cheering. Slink grinned up at Shaggy. Thanks, Shaggy, he was getting annoying. Should we be worried though? He could cause more problems. Shaggy shook his giant head as Chromia cautiously stepped forward. Dave and the other lackeys were moving towards Shaggy tentatively, too. It looked like the square hadn't taken any damage from the fighting, although a few houses near the bar were knocked down. Shaggy noticed that the incomplete bar was where Frank and the other builders had hidden during the fight. He was happy to see Petra and Mr. Blue had been monitoring their helpful builder friends. Although Petra had picked up the laser rifle again, and looked disappointed that she hadn't gotten to use it. They were all staring at him, though. Which was going to make changing back fairly tricky unless he wanted to appear bare-ass naked in front of all of them. He was considering it when Vlad and Amir showed up in front of everyone, both bleeding and both breathing hard. Vlad glanced around, staring at Shaggy for a few seconds, before he groaned and sat back in the dirt. Amir also took in his surroundings before he sighed and lowered his head. I don't suppose you can just let me go? I didn't really like Jerry, anyway. Vlad huffed. We probably couldn't catch you. You could just run for it. Amir chuckled, but shook his head. My stamina's real low. Even with my Reagan skills, it'll take a few minutes to get back to full. You all got me dead to rights. Your choice. Shaggy glanced at Vlad as the vampire looked back at him. It was Slink who broke into their conversation. You could join up with us. Amir smiled. No thanks. I just came down here as a favor to Otis. But maybe I'll hang around down here for a while. Things are getting pretty heated topside. Slink nodded understandingly as Shaggy and Vlad continued their silent conversation. Finally, and almost simultaneously, they both shrugged. Vlad waved a hand as Shaggy jerked his head to the west. You can get out of here. But make trouble for us again and we'll dust you. Vlad said. Amir eyed Shaggy, so he nodded his big lupin head in agreement. The yellow alien speedster smiled and took a big breath. Shaggy moved out of the way, and so did many lackeys as the speedster took off in a yellow blur. Vlad seemed to remember something as he cupped his hands over his mouth and shouted. Slink walked over to a nearby table and sat in the makeshift wooden seat. Shaggy could see Mo and another green snake crawl up Slink's pant leg. The young man sighed heavily as the snakes went up his shirt. Shaggy set himself on wolf hindquarters in the dirt and glanced between Slink and Vlad. You think he heard you? Slink asked. I don't care. I don't know how well he'd do against those big-ass lizards, but my money's on them. Vlad answered. Shaggy nodded and barked his agreement. Vlad and Slink snapped their heads up at him and stared. Shaggy preened under their stares. It felt good to be recognized for the awesome monster he was. Actually. Soft a voice said from right beside Shaggy. Several lackeys and Chromia were standing around beside him and rubbing his fur. He chuffed angrily at them, but that only made some of them look up at him happily. He growled, which is where most of the lackeys got the message. But not Chromia. She kept scratching his side as the other lackeys broke up and went back to what they were doing. She even chided Shaggy. Bad dog man, this is your only redeeming quality. Do you think you could stay like this? Shaggy snapped his teeth at her offending hand as Vlad and Slink chuckled. Chromia finally stopped scratching him and Shaggy felt a small part of himself whine in disappointment. He ignored it and turned back toward Vlad and Slink. Slink waved a hand at Chromia. Vlad laughed along as he rubbed the blood from his face. The vampire had a bunch of bruises and scrapes all over his visible skin. The fight with Amir hadn't been easy, apparently. Vlad gazed back up at Shaggy and nodded sadly. Yeah, I need to get some more points. Seems I need to go have a few solo adventures of my own. Get my vampire lord thing going. Shaggy nodded before he scratched behind his ear with a back paw. He missed the scratches, but that was a secret he was going to keep to the grave. He also had to find a spot to change back. The purple alien with his armor was standing nearby, looking like she didn't know what to do. Shaggy huffed before he walked toward the bar he was hoping had some of his clothes somewhere. But Vlad's voice spoke up behind him. Where are you going? You need to shift back so we can talk. Shaggy glanced back over his shoulder and sighed as Slink's eyes widened. The kid seemed to understand Shaggy's dilemma after a short while. Shaggy put his head down lower as Slink laughed loudly and explained Shaggy's predicament. Soon Vlad was laughing, too. Shaggy ignored them and wandered to the bar and prepared himself to run naked into its half-finished interior, fully naked. So that's an every dash. Vlad chuckled loudly as he sipped on a glass of something red. Shaggy wondered who had given the damn vampire blood. But he just let it go. With the way Lena, the purple alien woman who had his armor, had looked at Shaggy, he was sure Vlad had his share of brown-nosing lackeys. some of whom were probably more than willing to part with some of their blood. Even more so if Vlad played up the Children of the Night angle. Vlad saw him staring at the glass of blood, and the side of his mouth quirked up in a grin. Some of the new lackeys were wondering if I could turn them. Apparently vampire stories are big in game too. Shaggy nodded as he adjusted his new shorts. They were part of the set of clothes he had bought on the main street. But the damn things were uncomfortable as hell. But, considering how cheap they were, it wasn't really a surprise. It was better than sitting on a wooden chair naked. So, of course, you took advantage. Oh please, I just told them I needed to be more powerful. They asked how I got more powerful and I told them. Does it even help you? Shaggy asked as Frank and Petra walked by, discussing something about the bar. Nope. Our boys are pretty weak. Which is why I think, if I get the chance, I should turn a few of them. So should you. We could have an army of wers and vamps at our disposal. Shaggy started to argue when he realized he didn't know if he could do that. I'll look into that. I don't think it's even in my tree. Vlad nodded. Yeah, it just showed up in mine. But it's a point sucker. I've dumped 50 into the damn thing already. Shaggy grunted understandingly. He continued to look around the bar as he thought about the various ways they could increase their lackey's deadliness. Turning to henchmen was another obvious route. Or maybe they could find some way to teach a few magic. Some of them were aliens, so all they needed was training to increase. That is, if the NPC worked like the players did. He was about to bring it up with Vlad when Chromia and Slink walked into the half-complete bar. The two had been talking since Chromia saved Slink from Muscle Lord. To Shaggy, it looked like the kid had a crush, but Chromia seemed to not notice. Or she ignored the younger man. Chromia glanced over at Vlad and Shaggy and smirked at Shaggy. Shaggy flipped her off as Vlad raised his glass in greeting. Soon, the odd pair walked over to where Mr. Blue was handing out drinks. Petra had insisted that they keep the lackeys happy with booze. Mr. Blue had seemed reticent, but perked up when he heard everyone would be paying. Vlad had also made all the players hand out credits to a few of the lackeys. As a thank you for sticking around during the fight and also to see if it raised some loyalties. It had paid off. All of them had increased their personal lackey counts. Although none more so than Dave. Huh. HAH, sounded from outside and Shaggy turned to look at the blue-armored player. The happy-go-lucky guy was showing his various lackeys a few punches. It looked to Shaggy like the martial arts teacher was taking them through some katas. They all shouted as they happily threw punches, mimicking Dave. Apparently, his fight with the golem guy had impressed a lot of the thugs, and Dave now had a good chunk of men. Although when he didn't know what to do with them, Vlad and Shaggy told him to toughen them up. Sure, they had a good supply of guns, but when people could soak a few rounds before they went down, it paid to be ready for an up-close fight or at least know how to dodge. They actually had more weapons than Shaggy had remembered, but Vlad explained they were the spoils from Raku and other gang attacks. Pipes, chains, giant wrenches, and pistols made up the bulk of their armory. Along with a few automatic rifles and the 2 K-Tech energy rifles. They had more than enough to protect themselves, but they could always use more. Shaggy grunted. No kidding. Vlad took another sip from his glass as he stared at Shaggy. So, still not going to say about what happened topside? Told ya, waiting for Ren. I want everyone to hear this. Vlad finished his drink. Well, what am I supposed to do? Wait around? I want to get out there and get some points. Shaggy was about to tell the vampire to cool his jets when remembered something. Oh, damn it. Points. I need to check my points. Vlad stood and stretched out his arms and legs. Fine. You do that. I'm going to do some scouting around. Maybe I'll get lucky and the Raku will try attacking again. Pfft, unlikely. Shaggy said, thinking of Scholar. Vlad didn't say anything else as he walked away, leaving Shaggy to open his in-game menus. He held his breath as he navigated to his evolution trees and clicked on the tab. He hadn't checked the points he had gained while topside, but he was excited to see what he had gained. Lycanthrope mutation tree. Attack LVL5. Claws LVL15. Sharpness LVL3. Bone claws. Defense LVL5. Tough bones LVL1. Utility LVL5. Regeneration LVL25. Limb regen LVL2. Pain suppression LVL3. Partial transformation LVL1. Points 50. General tree. Toughness LVL17. Thick skin LVL5. Skin resistances LVL1. Reflexes LVL18. Quick hands LVL5. Manual dexterity LVL2. Mind LVL17. Enhanced focus LVL1. Points 120. Skills. Werewolf. Werewolf senses beginner level 2 asterisk. Werewolf form beginner level 3 asterisk. Werewolf speed beginner level 2 asterisk. Werewolf durability beginner level 3 asterisk. Normal. Claw fighting beginner level 2 asterisk. Leaping beginner level 3. Enhanced senses beginner level 4 asterisk. Endurance beginner level 3 asterisk. Fight like an animal beginner level 2 asterisk. Shaggy felt his breathing hitch for a second as he glanced at the point totals. Not to mention the skill gains. Going topside had been a fantastic idea. He had to stop himself from running out and going back up. Sure, running for his life most of the time had been a pain, but with gains like this, he was happy to do it. Sure, the werewolf point total was still lower than his general one. But 50 points could go a long way. At least he hoped they would. He set about placing his werewolf points first. He still felt he was doing fine with the regeneration in the utility tab. So he focused on his attack first. Claws were great, but he wanted to see what the next tier would give him. So he raised it to 15 and checked his tab. Attack LVL 15 asterisk. Canines LVL 0 asterisk. Claws LVL 15. Sharpness LVL 3. Bone claws. He felt his teeth sharpen into points in his mouth. It was a weird feeling as he ran as carefully over a few. The damn things were pretty sharp. But how often was he going to bite someone in a fight, really? But then he thought about it. It wasn't a bad idea. It would certainly surprise a few people, and everything goes when you were fighting for your life. Soon he made peace with the idea and put a point into the new Evo cell. He would test it a few times first. Maybe it increased his damage in the actual werewolf form too. Canines LVL1 asterisk. Shaggy grinned and started to put his leftover points into defense when he saw the one standout in his Evo tree. Partial transformation LVL1. Utility LVL 15 asterisk. Partial transformation LVL 5 asterisk. Limb transformation LVL 4 asterisk. He mentally swore again as he quickly checked his point total. But it was still at 30. The system had raised the level of the partial transformation itself. Shaggy gave a mental cheer and even raised his hands, drawing a few odd looks. He ignored them as he looked over the improvements. Partial transformation was now a part of the tree and had even risen to the level he was currently using it at, giving him the limb transformation cell as well. He briefly raised his hand and shifted it back and forth between human and wolf claws. He found that not only was the transformation smoother, but he felt like he could now do it to any part of his body. Much like most skills, the information on how was just there in his mind. He knew he just had to will it and he could make it happen. He wondered if he experimented a bit, he could unlock a different cell and see the same gains again. But he shook it off. It was an idea for the forums later. Shaggy instead looked back at his defense cell and started putting in points. However, his point total quickly dropped. Shaggy let go of the mental button and looked at the reminder of his points, and saw that he was sitting at 10 points left. It had taken 20 points to get his defense up to 10. He swore out loud this time as he guessed that the system made the other cells more expensive as everything leveled. Or maybe these points were from weaker enemies. He grunted and put the rest of his points into his tough bones cell. Thankfully, that one raised a bit quicker. Soon he stepped back and glanced over his full werewolf tree. Lycanthrope mutation tree. Attack LVL 15 *. Canines LVL 1 *. Claws LVL 15. Sharpness LVL 3. Bone claws. Defense LVL 10 *. Tough bones LVL 3 *. Utility LVL 15 *. Partial transformation LVL 5 *. Limb transformation LVL 4 *. Regeneration LVL 25. Limb regen LVL 2. Pain suppression LVL 3. Okay, it wasn't all horrible, Shaggy thought as he looked everything over. He also had another tree to go into. He rubbed his hands together as he brought up the general tree. General tree. Toughness LVL 17. Thick skin LVL 5. Skin resistances LVL 1. Reflexes LVL 18. Quick hands LVL 5. Manual dexterity LVL 2. Mind LVL 17. Enhanced focus LVL 1. Points 120. This time, as Shaggy thought about putting points into the separate trees, he tried to focus on all of them at once. Sure, he could probably min-max things, but where was the fun in that? So he focused on raising everything to 20 and watched his point total fall. It wasn't as rapid a decline as it was for the defense cell, but points still dropped like crazy as he watched everything raise. But soon enough, he was sitting with around 70 points left and all of his top cells were at level 20. So now, with a general boost to everything, including his HP, he looked at the subcells. Enhanced focus had been useful a few times. Mentally slowing down things to get a better look at the bigger picture was an impressive ability to have. He put a few points into it to see what it did, but with 5 points in, nothing had changed it. Shaggy sighed. It looked like the ability was going to be a point sucker. So instead, he focused on his thick skin ability and dumped some points into there. The point conversion seemed to go better as every few general points saw a rise in the ability's level. Before he knew it, the level of thick skin was at 15, and it had evolved into a new ability. Shaggy grinned as he checked his point total, which was at 58 points. Not too bad overall. Thick skin LVL 15 *. Skin resistances LVL 5 *. Skin durability LVL 0 *. Shaggy tried to think of the difference between durability and toughness, but quickly let it go. It was another layer of defense on his already thick hide. Maybe next time a mad scientist tried to cut him in half with a laser beam, he would come out of it better. He dumped a few points into the new skill, raising it to level 1. Raising the new ability took him down to the mid-40s in points, but he felt it was worth it in the long run. Next, he turned his attention back to enhanced focus. He had already dumped a few points in there. Plus, he really wanted the ability to grow. Who knew what kind of cells would evolve off of it? Shaggy grit his teeth and ignored his reflex cell entirely. Dumping loads of points into enhanced focus. He stopped when he had 10 points left and looked at the ability. Enhanced focus LVL 3 *. 2 levels for over 40 points. Shaggy shook his head and started pacing as he tried not to second-guess his decision. He dumped the remaining points into quick hands and checked the whole tree again. General tree. Toughness LVL 20 *. Thick skin LVL 15 *. Skin resistances LVL 5 *. Skin durability LVL 1 *. Reflexes LVL 20 *. Quick hands LVL 10 *. Manual dexterity LVL 2. Mind LVL 20 asterisk. Enhanced focus LVL 3 asterisk. Overall, it wasn't bad. He had made himself tougher all around. Even his mind would seem faster now. Plus, his hands would be quicker when he used them to claw through people as he often did. Tougher, faster moving, and faster thinking. Shaggy grinned to himself as he stopped pacing and opened his look at the full tree. Lycanthrope mutation tree. Attack LVL 15 asterisk. Canines LVL 1 asterisk. Claws LVL 15. Sharpness LVL 3. Bone claws. Defense LVL 10 asterisk. Tough bones LVL 3 asterisk. Utility LVL 15 asterisk. Partial transformation LVL 5 asterisk. Limb transformation LVL 4 asterisk. Regeneration LVL 25. Limb regen LVL 2. Pain suppression LVL 3. Points 0. General tree. Toughness LVL 20 asterisk. Thick skin LVL 15 asterisk. Skin resistances LVL 5 asterisk. Skin durability LVL 1 asterisk. Reflexes LVL 20 asterisk. Quick hands LVL 10 asterisk. Manual dexterity LVL 2. Mind LVL 20 asterisk. Enhanced focus LVL 3 asterisk. Points 0. HP 311 of 311. SP 298 of 298. Skills. Werewolf. Werewolf senses beginner level 2 asterisk. Werewolf form beginner level 3 asterisk. Werewolf speed beginner level 2 asterisk. Werewolf durability beginner level 3 asterisk. Normal. Claw fighting beginner level 2 asterisk. Leaping beginner level 3. Enhanced senses beginner level 4 asterisk. Endurance beginner level 3 asterisk. Fight like an animal beginner level 2 asterisk. Thinking about the old man reminded Shaggy that Cog hadn't been the one to take him down. It was the sheer number of the man's bots. He hadn't been outclassed, merely outgunned. Even now, he could probably last longer, but no way was he going to decimate an army by himself. Vlad was right, they needed to focus on their crew. Shaggy closed out his windows and looked around the framework of the bar. It was shaping up pretty well, if it was only a frame so far. They had some of the floor down, and the wooden floor was a welcome change from metal and dirt. As Shaggy glanced around, he noticed several lackeys were pointedly not looking at him. Nearby, Slink was seated with Chromia. The metal lady had a smirk on her face as Slink had a full-on grin. Shaggy twisted his head in confusion. "Dude, you've been wandering around and flailing like a madman for the past few minutes." It was hilarious. Shaggy grunted. "I was placing points into my trees." That explains the weird mood swings from happiness to fear to grudging acceptance. Slink chuckled as he drank his water. "I wonder how that looked to the NPC?" Shaggy said as he glanced around. Slink shook his head. "No idea, but some of them were looking at you like you had lost your mind. I thought they were supposed to ignore that. They ignore anything that might prove this is a game. So a guy wandering around acting like an idiot isn't really that strange. Even if they don't know the reason." Shaggy explained. Slink seemed to think about that as a clamor came from outside. Chromia jumped to her feet and almost jogged out of the bar. Tan skin turning silver again. Shaggy joined her as the crowd of lackeys outside cheered. Shaggy pushed his way through a few people before he broke through and saw Ren and some of their crew coming back with the delivery carts. Nearby, Chromia dropped her metal skin and glanced around before she found Slink again. Ren looked a little haggard and was surprised to see a square full of people. Even the NPCs with him seemed a little worried. But once Shaggy pushed to the front, they all calmed down. Shaggy was wondering what the cheering had been about. Then he remembered that Ren, Tinsel, and the others were off on another beer run. They had returned with 2 carts laden with barrels of booze. Shaggy had to give a yell as some of the new lackeys were making their way toward the carts. "Hey! That's for the bar, damn it. You want some? Buy it like everyone else. We might give some discounts for crew later, but we are trying to start a business here. So get back. Go about your business. If you don't have any, then find some." There was some grumbling as the lackeys drifted away. Shaggy heard Dave asking if anyone wanted to go on a run. There was some light agreement as Ren walked over to Shaggy. The carts were dragged and pushed toward the bar as they spoke. Apparently, the trip had been comparatively quiet compared to the last time they had made the trip. Shaggy also told Ren about the return of Muscle Lord. "That man going to be a problem?" Ren asked. Shaggy shrugged. "In the way, dumbasses are always a problem. But I don't think he is going to have too many other players helping him. The real trouble will be if he gathers a few lackeys like we have. I do not know, dude. I got back from topside and we had a whole cavalcade of thugs down here ready to sign up. After the Muscle Lord fight, we each got some new lackeys. Sorry you missed it." Ren waved him off. "Meh, the delivery crowd are pretty much my lackeys right now. Except Tinsel, I think. But I'll manage." Dave and his group of lackeys, who were all following him like ducklings, looked disappointed. But what Shaggy said seemed to register with the young man a few seconds later. He snapped his head up and nodded happily. Ren chuckled as they made their way toward the bar. Petra and Mr. Blue were taking inventory on the new barrels of booze. While nearby, a few lackeys hovered around, hopeful looks on their faces. Shaggy sighed and shooed them away. He started towards Slink and Chromia's table before Petra tapped him on the shoulder. "Sorry, boss, but we have to talk about our shipments. Beer is all well and good, but we need other amenities." "Boo!" someone shouted from nearby. Shaggy wiped the smile from his face as Petra sent a glare in the voice's direction. "I get it, Petra. I will bring it up in the meeting we are about to have." Petra's eyes shined as she moved toward him. "We are having a meeting?" Shaggy stepped back at the gleam in her eye before he coughed awkwardly. Yeah. Leadership is going to have a sit-down meeting and we're going dash." "Well, let's get going," Petra said happily, moving past Shaggy toward Ren and the others. Petra, no, we were dash. Mr. Shaggy. You made me the manager of this establishment and I have several things I would like to say about our day-to-day. So I think I should be included in any meetings we have going forward." "Agreed?" Shaggy sighed and stared at the angry glare from the scaly woman. Eventually, he nodded and waved a hand toward the table. Petra smiled happily and informed Mr. Blue what she was doing. As Shaggy moved over to the table, he gave her a wan smile and sat down. As he looked across the table and Slink's questioning face, he saw Chromia standing just behind the young man like she was a bodyguard. Shaggy raised an eyebrow at the pair, but neither said anything. Ren collected a chair for Petra, who gave the large rhino man a grateful smile and sat down. She collected herself before she looked around happily. Dave was sitting in a backwards-facing chair and drumming a tune idly on the table as he looked around at the ongoing construction. A thought seemed to strike him as he said excitedly, "A band. We got to do music when we get this place set up." Petra nodded and adjusted the glasses on her face. "Agreed. Appropriate entertainment is on the list. Although parties can get hectic in Undertown." Where did she get glasses? Shaggy thought. Was she always wearing those? From the looks on some of the others' faces, Shaggy didn't think so. But Petra powered on as she swiped a finger over her tablet. "Okay, first order of business." She started, but Shaggy raised a hand. "Hold on, Petra. We have to wait for Vlad. I want all of our leadership here before we get down to business. Also, I think we should leave bar business for the end, if you don't mind." Ren raised a hand, but also so did Dave as he rocked back on his backwards chair. The two stumbled over each other for a bit before Ren let the smaller man talk. Yeah, about that. Why am I part of leadership? I don't mind, but I was just wondering. Shaggy coughed into his hand awkwardly. Well, you have most of the lackeys out of us. I mean, next to Slink. But they seem to gravitate toward you, so if you don't mind running with us, then you are going to be in a leadership position. But you could also take those guys and start your own crew or something, I guess. Dave sat his chair back down and waved his arms. Oh no thanks, dude. I was just wondering. I'll stay here. You guys are the ones who are helping me make sense of some of this stuff. Like, what's the teacher skill do? Slink sighed and explained. Like we told you, Dave. You just have to mentally hover over the skill and it should give you an idea of what it is. But if I had to guess, it's from you teaching some of those lackeys your kung fu. Nah. I don't know any kung fu. It's just good old-fashioned karate. But that makes sense. Yeah, it says I can help increase others' skill in my preferred martial art. Cool. It's like what I do in the real world. Wait, I don't know if I want to do my job in a game. Shaggy rubbed a hand down his face. Well, if you could just do it every now and again. We would be grateful. Making our lackeys stronger is good for all of us. Ren nodded. Just whenever you feel like would be good. Also, to the other point, I think we should get the bar business out of the way while we can. Vlad doesn't have to be here for that, and we can move on the gang-related stuff when he comes back. Shaggy looked at Ren and then at Petra, who seemed to vibrate in her chair with excitement. Tablet clutched in her hands. Shaggy sighed and gave the bigger player the stink eye. Fine. Petra hit us with the business talk. Petra coughed and adjusted her pair of amazing randomly appearing spectacles. Shaggy sat back in his chair and winced as it creaked noisily. He groaned as Petra started going into the current state of affairs of the bar. Ren listened with rapt attention as Dave seemed to follow a fly with his eyes. Slink and Chromia were having a whispered conversation and Shaggy let the chatter drone over him as he tried to will Vlad to hurry back. Shaggy snapped his head back up and glanced around. The others were still looking at Petra, who had just finished talking. So no one seemed to know that he had nodded off for a few seconds there. He mentally went over what he last remembered, but most of it was related to the various minutiae of running a bar. Shaggy didn't really get most of it, but Ren and even Slink, surprisingly, kept the conversation going. From what he understood, they had a staffing and a supply line problem. They could use some thugs to shore up the staffing issues. But the tunnel where they got their booze was under the control of another gang. So they had to pay a surcharge just to get their ordered shipment. The gang that ran the tunnel to Topside was a small offshoot of the Quinnica. Also, if they wanted more than just liquor, they were going to have to pay more. When Ren had asked about taking the tunnel for themselves, Petra had explained that they simply didn't have the manpower. If they took a tunnel, they would spend all their time defending it and wouldn't have enough time to even run shipments through it. For now, it made more sense to keep paying the Quinnica. But they needed to increase their payments if they wanted to include food for the bar. Partway through Petra's portion of the meeting, Blobby came back with more lumber and even a few workers for Frank. Then Ephemera showed up, dragging 1138 around like it was some kind of doll. But neither of them seemed to have the stomach to sit through a business meeting, and Shaggy couldn't blame them. Ephemera took the corpse of 1138 somewhere after assuring Shaggy the thing had been magically debugged. While Blobby took a well-earned break and socialized with some of the new crew. So it sounds like money is still our biggest issue, Shaggy said, trying to sound like he had been paying attention. Everyone turned their heads to him and stared. But he shrugged. Regardless of what they had been talking about, he probably wasn't wrong. Yes, Shag. That's why we are trying to think up other revenue streams. Slink sighed. Shaggy raised an eyebrow. We just take it. Right? I mean, what did we get for those drugs we got from the freaks? Low-cost healing from the Needle Sisters. Ren answered. What else? Nothing else. That was it. We turned over the bags and Rashi said we would get a discount. Shaggy put his head in his hands. We didn't ask about the crap that wasn't medicine? There had to be something in there we could have sold. I've told you I am not comfortable selling drugs. Ren grunted, crossing his large gray arms over his chest. Shaggy put his hands up. Fine. Then we are stuck with robbing the other gangs around here and charging protection fees. Unless we want to head topside. But I tell you that's a pain in the ass, and if we start asking people for money, then Vlad's hearts and mind shtick is going to go down fast. Slink nodded and tapped the table. Once we have the bar up and running, it should be able to pay for itself. If all goes well. So all we need is the startup capital. Which we can get from the other gangs. Ren said. Shaggy agreed and glanced at Petra. How much do we need and when do we need it? Petra looked down at her tablet and swiped a few times before she looked back up. It's going to take a couple thousand in credits to get everything going. Although we are saving a lot by basically kidnapping our workforce. Shaggy looked over at Frank and his work crew, who were all diligently working under the eye of a few thugs. Hey! It's not kidnapping. He said indignantly. They're all adults. That means it's abduction. Completely different. Plus we are paying in favors. They all just looked at him as he grinned at himself. Soon Petra Coffin continued. Once we have the credits, we can then see about making our shipments a regular thing. Ren nodded. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Tinsel and the others have scared enough of the smaller gangs off by now. But we might want to send a few people north to cement the message. Yeah. So it sounds like we leave one group here and the rest split into teams and start making credits. Shaggy cracked his knuckles happily at the thought. What's the split? For the cruise? Dave asked, having spun around in his chair. Apparently, sitting backwards in a chair for a long period was bad for his legs. Shaggy jumped at hearing Dave's voice. The usually boisterous young man had been quiet for the past few minutes. Which surprised Shaggy. Then what Dave had said registered with him. He forgot about paying their lackeys. He was willing to bet they would leave in droves if they didn't get rewarded for their work. Shaggy glanced at Ren and Slink. Ren looked to be thinking, but Slink spoke up. What about 50% goes to the gang and the other 50 is split between the crew that did the job? Anything found on a body is the finder's. But anyone found looting during a fight doesn't get a share. Shaggy raised an eyebrow as Ren clapped his large hands. Great idea. But team leads should get a larger share, right? Sure. But we can come back to that once we are fully set up. We are going to have to do something like a payroll for the entire gang eventually. But for now, we can earn goodwill with the NPCs and cement a base for ourselves. Slink explained. You've been on the forums, haven't you? Shaggy said with a fong-filled smile. Slink just grinned back and shrugged. Petra looked between them all and nodded before she stood up. Okay, I think that is all that I had, really. Let me know when we have the capital and Mr. Blue can place the order with his people. Yeah, how does he do that anyway? Shaggy asked. Petra shrugged. He sends a runner to the Quinnica. They are the ones who hold the tunnel and they save or reserve our goods on their shipments. As Shaggy nodded, a tired-looking Vlad stepped through the large space where the bar door was going to go. He had blood down the front of his face and shirt. The vampire looked a little punch-drunk to Shaggy, but he made his way toward them and sat down in Petra's now empty chair. Petra gave them all a smile and walked over toward Frank and Mr. Blue. Shaggy glanced over at Vlad's suit and cape. The vampire player had really played up the motif when he had created his character. But now the cape was torn, and the suit was dirty and bloody all over. Shaggy was about to tell Vlad to buy a change of clothes, but he let it go. Who was he to talk? He was going through clothes faster than he could buy them. In fact, he was surprised Ren's clothes were still in decent condition. So, Vlad started. Rack of thugs are still coming into our territory, Wolfie. He didn't make the statement accusatory, but the question was clearly there. Shaggy sighed. Scholar said she would do something. Let's be vigilant, but give her some time. We can have a group head that way, anyway. To monitor things and to go forward with our plans. Plans? Shaggy and the others explained their idea of marching out in force and start stealing for the other gangs. Vlad nodded along understandingly and even seemed a bit excited at the prospect. After asking a few questions about the bar and the division of lackeys, the others asked Shaggy to go over what he had wanted to tell them. After calling for ephemera, Shaggy explained about their trip topside. He glossed over most of the stuff about the police handler, mainly focusing on the villain's diner and the supers he had fought. They all had a good laugh at the 5 colorful motorcycle supers and the ninjas. Both Ephemera and Slink added their own anecdotes to the story from their perspectives. Then Shaggy went over their encounter with Cog. He explained how the old man had brought them to his lair and the various robots they had seen. He also went over how they had been intentionally goaded into a fight and his Pyrrhic victory over the old man. The others gaped at him as he told them how he was cut in half by Cog's robots and eventually dropped the ceiling on both of them. Dude, you killed a named villain? That's freaking crazy. Slink asked, wide-eyed. Yeah. I don't think anyone's done that yet. Vlad added as Ren nodded in agreement. But Shaggy shook his head. They still haven't. It was all a part of some ritual to make Cog young again. He had to die in battle in order for it to work, I guess. So he goaded us, and then I killed him, so whatever spell was on him worked. Now he's back, young again, and just as crazy. Shaggy glanced at the others as they looked at him, amazed. What? You still killed him? Ren said simply. Yeah? Yeah. I guess I did. Heh. Shaggy scratched the back of his head awkwardly. Still doesn't change the fact that there's a megalomaniac topside with an army of robots. Vlad waved him off. Bah. That's a problem for the supers. What we need to do is capitalize on this win. Did you post any of the footage? Deathville doesn't record. Slink said, sounding annoyed. Still, the win would look good for us. We could get more players and start an actually league down here. Turn our hideout into a full-scale lair and really get shit going. Shaggy shrugged. We really want to get people that way? I'd rather be a little more careful about recruiting players. We got plenty of muscle with the lackeys. I agree. We should be a little more careful with players we don't know. Ren said. Dave coughed awkwardly and looked away. Everyone gave him chagrined looks and promised they weren't talking about him. Shaggy coughed again before he turned back to Vlad and explained. I just want anyone new to gel well with the rest of us. I'm not really one for guild-level play. Always been more of a grunt, myself. Vlad nodded as he visibly calmed down. Yeah. That's understandable. Still, though, keep that footage. Shaggy agreed, and they fell into silence for a short time, each lost in their own thoughts. Shaggy glanced around and noticed several lackeys just loitering near the bar. They really had to wrap all this up and get their crew out there. A gang that sat around doing nothing wasn't worth much. He looked back at his friends and rapped his knuckles on the table. When they all looked at him, he said. Okay, so one of us stays here and guard/babysits our bar. The rest of us split in separate directions and march on some territory. The Raku are to the south. Do we want that headache? Vlad asked, as he did his best to wipe the dirt from his clothes. East of us is the cavern wall. Not a lot to explore there. Ren added. Okay. So Slink and Ephemera, you take a smaller portion of our crew. The sneakiest of the bunch and engage in some espionage down south. Shaggy said. Ephemera and Slink both nodded, but Chromia frowned. I'll go with them. I know the area better and can point out soft targets. Shaggy stared at the enemy, turned ally with suspicion. He glanced at Ephemera and waved his head at the tan woman. She ain't wrong, but keep an eye on her. Ephemera pointed a finger gun at him. Got it, boss. Standing right here. Chromia muttered. Slink looked excited at the prospect of traveling with his two favorite women. But Shaggy ignored it and turned to Vlad. So, between the rest of us, who wants to pull guard duty? Oh, I got guard duty, my dudes. Dave said excitedly. I'm going to be online for a while anyway, and I can teach the crew some stuff while I'm here. Shaggy shrugged his shoulders and looked at Ren and Vlad. 2 directions and 3 of us. West is Freak and UGB Turf. North is Unclaimed, and to our northwest is the Brute Clan. Ren stretched. I've seen enough of the North. Nothing but small-time thugs. But we need to clean it out for safer shipments deliveries. I think I'll take West, though. Vlad didn't disagree, and instead steepled his fingers and grinned. I have another idea. Shaggy, why don't you take North and I'll go topside? Did you not hear my story? It's a shit show up there. Shaggy said. Yeah, but you explained what we have to look out for. Drones and supers. Piece of cake for a creature of the night, like me. Shaggy shrugged. Whatever, dude. If you get dropped into Deathville, don't come blaming me. Guess that leaves me with the North. All we have to do now is divide up the crew and get to work. Ren nodded. Yeah, but we should be on the lookout. The Raku are still sending their dregs at us. Looking at Slink, Chromia, and Ephemera, he added. Maybe y'all can look into that as well? Slink and the 2 women nodded. The rest of them fell into discussing a head count of their lackeys. They were still getting a few filtering in, but for now, they had a large group of people. Plus, if anyone showed up while they were gone, they could be added to the defense team. They also discussed their weapon shortage. Shaggy and the others had the professor's weapons, although he hadn't seen Rin using that hammer of his yet. But the rest of them were still woefully outgunned by the bigger gangs. As they eventually broke apart and headed to gather their assigned lackeys, Shaggy grinned. He was heading into virtually unknown territory. Newly powered up, with a crew of NPCs ready for a fight. He really couldn't wait for his wife to get in here and play with them. But for now, it was another day and another adventure. Time to cause some mayhem. Shaggy ducked an incoming punch from a random teenager and slammed a fist into the kid's abdomen. The poor boy doubled over and started coughing. Shaggy grabbed the guy by his hair and put the point of his knee into the kid's nose. The boy went limp and Shaggy glanced around. Blobby was flailing their tentacles around, whipping anyone who could get close, while the other members of their war party beat into the hapless bunch of thugs. Shaggy had taken 10 lackeys with him. They still didn't have a communal pool to pull from yet. So he and the other players each grabbed the lackeys that had some level of loyalty with them. Shaggy had 9 others besides Blobby, Ephemera, and Tinsel on his lackey list now. Each with a loyalty rating of 40 or above. Apparently, beating the shit out of people was a good way to prove your strength to the NPC lackeys. Tinsel had opted to head out with Ren, which was understandable. But Blobby said they wanted to get out and bust some heads. So Shaggy brought them along with the new bloods. Less than half of this new group were full human, and they were all low level, according to his lackey tab, but they were holding their own with the small-time hoods in the north. Shaggy had to duck as another one of the teenage wannabes went flying over his head. Turning, he saw the large lizard man, Seacrass. Shaggy had mistaken the guy for a member of the Brute clan, something the large reptile man hated. Apparently, he was a part of a different alien race entirely. Shaggy shouted at the nearly 7-foot-tall, slim reptile alien. Whoa! Seacrass, watch where you're throwing people. Seacrass rubbed his hands together and his long tail jolted around nervously. I'm sorry, boss. I didn't think he would go that far. Maybe you shouldn't be standing there like a bump on a log, boss man. Shouted a human man nearby. The well-built man jumped and aimed a headbutt at an oncoming thug. The flying headbutt caught the thug full in the face, and he went down in a heap. Shaggy watched as Yuki started kicking his opponent over and over. Shaggy sighed and let the lackeys do most of the fighting. These smaller gangs weren't even a challenge for him or his lackeys. They had even stopped using their guns, as most of the gangs would run off if they saw one. Except those with more durable aliens. "Hey, Yuki! He's done. Move on," shouted a woman's voice. The older woman, Rita, hip-tossed another thug and punched them in the temple. The poor thug passed out and Rita laid her opponent down on the dirt street. Shaggy ignored Yuki's response as he moved through the fight. The pair had been arguing since they left the bar. Yuki was clearly a hothead young dude, whereas Rita was tough, but somehow matronly older woman. Several young gang members tried to stop him as he moved through the crowd. But what his crew didn't handle, a single punch from him did the job. Shaggy sighed and thought about how he should have gone topside with Vlad. At least up there had been challenging. Shaggy snapped another jab into some poor kid's face and moved over to a squat metal building with a yellow and white gang symbol on it. The gangsters from this neighborhood had assured him it was supposed to be some kind of alien language meaning elite warriors. But for all Shaggy knew, the yellow and white scribbles meant free chicken on Tuesdays. Shaggy didn't bother with the door and just shoved his transformed claws into the metal wall and started cutting. Nearby he saw his new lackeys, Relsh and Vic, stopping a few thugs from assaulting him. He finished cutting a hole in the wall and gave them a wave of thanks. The lackeys were pretty good at dealing with rabble, that was for sure. But they were in no way comparable to the players. But Shaggy thought that the level in the lackey tab looked promising. Who knew? Maybe lackeys could get super powerful if they leveled enough. Shaggy shook off his thoughts as a loud bang resounded in the metal building he walked into. He felt something pelt against his skin and smelt gunpowder in the air. Someone had tried to shoot him. Shaggy glanced around and found a skinny kid with a pistol, crouching behind a makeshift wooden bar. The kid wasn't wearing a shirt, and he was clearly terrified that his pistol wasn't working. The shaky kid fired a few more shots at Shaggy, most of which went wide, but a few pelted Shaggy in the chest and legs. Tearing up his new clothes, again. Shaggy growled and launched himself at the kid. The gang leader tried to back away, but tripped and fell onto his ass. Shaggy dismissed his claws and gripped the thug by his hair, and batted the gun away. The shots had caused a lot of shouts to come from outside, and Shaggy was hoping none of his guys had gotten shot. Shaggy casually smashed the gang leader through the bar and picked up the gun. The gang leader tried to crawl away, but Shaggy stomped a foot down on the guy's leg. "Hey now. Don't go leaving so soon. I gotta talk to you." The shirtless gang leader tried to turn over as Shaggy was standing on his leg. Shaggy kept the pressure on as the kid punched Shaggy's leg to get free. Seeing that turning over wasn't working, the gang leader reached into a pant pocket and pulled out a slim knife. Shaggy sighed again and slapped the loser in the face as the kid tried to stab him. The blow sent the kid reeling back onto the floor, where he held his cheek and screamed in pain. "Oh, shut up. I didn't even hit you that hard. Now wise up and answer my question. Where do you damn kids get your weapons? These aren't that impressive. But you're the third small-time outfit we've hit that's had a few of them." The gang leader screamed in pain for a short while more. Until Shaggy wrenched the boy up and threw him into a nearby rat-infested couch. The guy continued to whimper, so Shaggy threatened him a few more times. It wasn't until Shaggy grew his claws and thrust them under the boy's chin that the thug found his voice. "Geez man. You can find guns everywhere. Someone on Main is always selling them. They might be shit, but we got needs. You know?" The kid said around his whimpering. Shaggy grumbled and looked over at the small pistol. It looked pretty old and beat up once he studied it closer. He grunted, annoyed, and tucked the gun into the waistband of his pants. Only to quickly take it out again. That was not comfortable at all. He looked around the squalid little hut and tried to see if there was anything of value. But it was slim pickings. It looked like all this gang's money was going into drugs and alcohol. Also shitty guns. Shaggy gave the skinny gang leader a once-over. The young man had junkie written all over him. He was sickly thin and his hair looked like it was falling out. Shaggy gave a grunt and stood. This entire operation was beginning to seem like a bust. He lifted the gang leader's gun up and fired a shot right into the leader's head. The junkie gang leader slumped over dead on the couch as Shaggy walked back out of the hole in the wall and took in the view. His crew had been victorious. Most of them looked to be nursing some pretty big bruises, but they were overall fine. Shaggy tried to see if anyone was shot, but his newest headache rushed into his face, excitedly. "Boss, boss, boss. We got over 400 credits so far with this lot," Tom said happily. Shaggy pushed the human man's head out of his way and continued to look around. Once he was sure none of his were shot, he glanced over at Tom. The lackey was shuffling from foot to foot, holding a credit reader they had found. Someone had put the guy in charge of handling the loot in order to shut him up. It hadn't worked. Shaggy pointed a finger inside the hut. "Leader's in there with a bullet in his skull. See what he has on him." Tom nodded frantically and rushed into the building. Nearby, Gorge and Zaliran were turning over unconscious or dead bodies and going through their pockets. Yuki and Rita were still arguing while Blobby was eating a few of the corpses. Shaggy gave another grunt as he threw the small pistol to a pale alien woman named Sybil. "Rest up. Once Tom has an account of everything here, we'll move on again." There was a mix of cheers and grumbles as everyone set about taking the valuables from their latest victory. Shaggy knew that every credit helped, but these small-timers really weren't worth the effort sometime. He rattled the credit chips in his pocket and thought about Petra's projections for the bar. They needed thousands and his crew were barely clearing 100 per gang hideout. Shaggy moved through the bodies lying in the street and sat next to Blobby, who was currently digesting his meal. "Boss." "Blobby," Shaggy said as he sat back against a metal hut. Blobby's amorphous form burbled. "You doing all right, boss?" "Yeah. I'm good, Blob. But these small-timers aren't going to make us the money we need." "Of course not. This is the middle of nowhere. Even for Undertown. It's just the dregs up here. But at least it's good exercise." Shaggy nodded as he idly watched an alien man dissolve in Blobby's blue form. He turned away as the skin started to melt away. "I get that, but I am so bored." Yuki grunted from nearby. "Humph. Well, you could help a little more. You were just wandering around during that whole fight." Shaggy glanced at the stocky young man. Some of the lackeys had surrounded Tom and were getting the credit chips evaluated. But Yuki was still slowly going through pockets. Shaggy smirked and answered the angry bastard. "Should I wipe your ass for you too? I can take most of these small-timers myself. It's you lot that need the training. No better way to learn than to get your head knocked in a few times." Yuki sneered at him, but said nothing. Nearby, some of the other lackeys chuckled at Shaggy's words. Shaggy was sure he had lost some loyalty to that little remark, but the bright white letters at the bottom of his vision proved him wrong. "Murayama Yuki, loyalty up." Shaggy snorted in amazement and brought up his lackey tab. As he looked at the long list of people that were currently his lackeys. He was pretty sure their personalities played a part in raising their loyalty. But he didn't have a reliable metric to farm it. So far, being himself had proven pretty effective. But he was sure some form monkey had crunched the numbers in the most efficient way to raise loyalty. 'Cause that made games fun, efficiency. Tinsel Tantonymia. Paranadan, level 4. Personality calm. Loyalty 50 out of 100. Ephemera Nalic. Staffantum, level 5. Personality chaotic. Loyalty 78 out of 100. Blublin Blobiner Blubberski, Blobby. Mucunoid level 3. Personality ambivalent. Loyalty 74 out of 100. Tom Fash. Human level 2. Personality Jabberjaw. Loyalty 64 out of 100. Sybil D. Dayan level 2. Personality Stoic. Loyalty 55 out of 100. Gorge Tiv. Slycavian level 2. Personality Calm. Loyalty 47 out of 100. Zelyran Davik. Jerkavik level 2. Personality Chaotic. Loyalty 60 out of 100. Seacrass Forces. Varanoid level 2. Personality Dim-witted. Loyalty 70 out of 100. Vic Nash. Human level 2. Personality Combative. Loyalty 60 out of 100. Rita Crawford. Human level 2. Personality Motherly. Loyalty 43 out of 100. Relsh Poiter. Ashikian level 2. Personality Fastidious. Loyalty 42 out of 100. Murayama Yuki. Human level 3. Personality Chaotic. Loyalty 53 out of 100. Tinsel's loyalty was getting concerning, but Shaggy chalked it up to him not hanging out with the big rhino man. Meanwhile, Ephemera's loyalty had gone up while Blobby's had gone down. If only a little. So hanging out with your lackeys was essential to building loyalty. But they also had to like you too. Yuki finished searching through pockets and threw the credits chits to Tom. Okay, short stack. Why don't you take on the next group of small-timers and show us lowly grunts how it's done? Shaggy looked at the top of Yuki's head and gauged the dude's height. If anything, he was slightly taller than the broad-shouldered young man. Before Shaggy could answer, the alien, Gorge, spoke up. Hey, didn't you see him wolf out back at the bar? I'm pretty sure he could clean house with a few of the gangs out here. Yeah. Agreed Vic. He bit that one guy's head off. Best not go around giving him shit, little Yuki. Vic snorted as Yuki got in his face angrily. The taller man stared down at Yuki and looked ready to say something, but Shaggy interrupted. There's an idea. I'll do the next gang myself. After that, you lot can do the next one. Then so on and so forth until we get bored. Shaggy glanced around at the others, who all looked pensive at his idea. He saw Rita chewing her nails worriedly, and even Sybil looked put off by his words. Shaggy raised an eyebrow at everyone as they stood in the dirt and body-filled street. Soon the alien, Zelyran, coughed and said. Boss. Taking out a small gang without you and without guns is probably a step too far. Just saying, boss. Shaggy stared at the scaly alien for a few seconds before he nodded. Oh. No, you guys can take the next gang however you want. Use those pistols of yours or whatever. But if anything goes too bad, I'll also step in. But if I have to step in, then that means you all have to go through Dave's training when we get back. Several lackeys nodded in agreement. While others, including Yuki, didn't seem to like the idea of taking the excitable players' lessons. They all discussed it between themselves for a few minutes before Blobby brought up an issue. But what do we get if we have to step in to save you? Shaggy snorted and looked at the eager faces of his lackeys. I'll give you my share of the loot if it comes to that. But we all know it won't. Rita, Vic, Gorge and Tom cheered, with Seacrash joining in a few seconds later. The others still looked a little worried, but some of them nodded in agreement. Yuki was staring at Shaggy, but he ignored the angry little man. This was a decent way of shaking things up, with virtually no downside for him. So far, nothing in the north section of Undertown could challenge him. At least he hadn't met anything yet. Shaggy rubbed the claws of his right hand against the claws of his left. It sent an interesting tingle down his forearm. It was a fun feeling to have as he walked down the dirt streets of Undertown's north side. The lackeys had spread out in different directions, looking for the next gang. Rita had been the first to find them a few blocks away, closer to the northeast cave wall of Undertown. The lackeys were now following behind Shaggy, watching him carefully as he strolled down the streets. He had seen a few guys wearing similar purple bandanas on a few street corners. They were just hanging around watching the various dirt roads, occasionally talking to the random citizenry. Shaggy hadn't seen any drugs exchange hands yet, but the guys had to be doing something. Unless they were just lookouts. More gangsters had appeared, each wearing various bits of purple clothing. Shaggy grinned and raised his bloody claws. He saw a tall, muscular human grimace as a few of the other assembled gangsters shifted nervously. He looked around and started counting. Going by the scent trails in the air, there were 8 thugs in front of him and 2 more on nearby rooftops. Luckily, the buildings were so short and close together that Shaggy figured he could jump up to deal with the ranged filth. Shaggy started forward, doing his best to appear menacing. He was sure his bloody claws helped. He was moving at a brisk walk when the first shot went off. Not from the streets, but from one of the bastards on a nearby roof. Shaggy felt the bullet hit him and saw another piece of his white shirt go sailing away from his body. Thankfully, the professor's armor underneath his shirt helped absorb some of the impact. But he was going to need new clothes after this. Maybe he would steal Yuki's clothes. They were about the same size. Shaggy felt the bullet hole close, and he burst into a full run down the street. The 8 gangsters ahead of him were now clearly scared as they drew their own weapons. Shaggy was extremely surprised to see that all 8 had guns, and not just the regular black pistols he had seen. Several had large silver guns, and the muscular leader, Jacko, was wielding a damn hand cannon. It looked like a damn gold-plated revolver. Smoke and gunfire rose in the street as Shaggy jumped forward. He could feel the holes opening up in his legs and arms as he flew through the air. Thankfully, the dumbass gangsters had all stayed where they were, taking up shooting stances to fill him with lead. Shaggy fell upon them with his claws extended, rending flesh wherever he touched. He felt and heard several bullets hit his body, but he ignored them as he chopped through a man's arm. Screams joined the gunfire as Shaggy spun. His claws were stained red as random men and women went down around him, most with pieces missing. He righted himself and tried to find Jacko. But the gang leader was clearly smarter than his men. He had backpedaled away from the melee and was reloading his large 6-shooter. Shaggy stabbed his claws down into a groaning gangster and then started for the leader. But a loud noise and sharp pain forced him to stop. One of the shooters on the roofs had hit him in the kneecap. It was healing and Shaggy was getting good at ignoring the pain. But Shaggy figured he would do more harm if he moved. Jacko saw this and grinned as he loaded another bullet into the revolver cylinder. Shaggy threw himself to the side and toward the building where more gunfire was coming from. Most of the guys in the street were down or scurrying away. So Shaggy ignored them and let his knee heal. Shaggy glanced up and saw Jacko raising his large revolver. He jumped on his newly healed knee and grabbed the rim of the roof, lifting himself up and over. A few more bullets pelted his shoulders and head, but he ignored them as he lunged at the hapless gunman on the roof. She tried to dodge, but Shaggy proved too quick for her, planting his claws into the meat of her belly and ripping upward. Her screams filled the air as gunshots came from another roof. Shaggy grabbed the woman's gun and returned fire at the adjacent roof. The shooter was using the roof slip for cover, so Shaggy sent a few rounds at the shooter to keep him down. As he did, he took another running leap and easily cleared the gap between buildings. Shaggy came down into a forward roll and lost his grip on his gun. He heard it go clattering across the roof as he got back to his feet. The second roof shooter was hurriedly smacking another magazine into his pistol. The poor purple alien was wide-eyed as Shaggy approached. Shaggy grinned with his sharp teeth and lunged just as the thug raised his gun. The shot went off and Shaggy felt the bullet hit his chest armor. The bullet clinked to the metal roof and Shaggy felt the bruise healing as he mutilated the shooter with his claws. Shaggy grabbed the new gun and checked himself. With his increased toughness and defense, normal pistols did next to nothing to him. The Kevlar in his Eifert armor was just icing on the cake. But the large caliber guns were actually piercing his skin and parts of the armor. Jacko's own gun had taken large chunks off the leather armor. The holes were all healed close, but now Shaggy was practically shirtless, with his armor missing a few pieces. His pants weren't doing too well, either. Shaggy glanced down for a few seconds at the corpse of the shooter he had just killed. But the guy's shirt was shredded. Sighing, he glanced over the edge of the roof and checked for Jacko. But the leader was long gone. His own lackeys were off in the distance to the west, watching. Shaggy waved them forward and reached into his pockets. Shaggy grabbed a chocolate bar, whose wrapper was covered in his own blood, from his pocket. He sighed again, but unwrapped the bar and scarfed it down. He just thanked his lucky stars the thing hadn't been hit by a bullet. The taste of gunpowder could ruin any chocolate bar. He felt his healing finish as he leapt over the side of the roof and thudded to the dirt floor. Blobby and the others were going through the nearby dead thugs as Yuki walked up to Shaggy. The stocky man was almost sauntering as he approached. "You missed one," Yuki said smugly. Yeah. I'll get him," Shaggy said, throwing the chocolate wrapper to the ground. "Why don't you hand over your shirt so I can chase him down?" Yuki glared. "Why do you need my shirt?" Shaggy waved at his shirtless torso. "Come on. I can't go around topless. You have your armor." "Yeah, boss. Besides, anything you put on is going to get ruined, anyway." "You need some enchanted clothing," Blobby burbled as their tentacles rifled through a dead gangster's pockets. Vic nodded quietly as he pointed at the bodies. "Also, can you stop using your claws? Going through severed limbs and bloody clothes is not a fun time." Shaggy threw his hands up in the air and put on an indignant expression. "Oh, I'm sorry if looting is too disgusting for all of you. Why don't you all sit down and I'll make tea for everyone?" "That actually sounds nice." Rita smiled. "I'll take an Earl Grey. Coffee for me. I like green tea. Chai, please." "I'm not taking drink orders," Shaggy shouted while trying not to laugh. He could see the other lackeys smiling and thought about checking their loyalties. But suddenly, the ground beneath Shaggy's feet shook roughly. He saw all the other lackeys, except Blobby, stumble and try to keep their feet. He looked around just as the shaking stopped. The odd alien or human sticking their head outside their door, but there was no sign of what had caused the sudden earthquake. The other lackeys all looked worriedly at the ceiling above them. But after a few tense minutes, things seemed to calm down. Shaggy adjusted his armor and moved closer to Blobby. "This whole cavern is reinforced, right?" "I believe so. Supposedly, the criminals that founded Undertown had everything reinforced with magic. But that could just be hearsay." "Delightful," Shaggy muttered as nearby Tom was collecting credits. Shaggy set about finding Jacko's scent trail and tried to ignore the possibility of the cavern roof falling on all of them. The blue scent trail went further east, so Shaggy waited for the lackeys to finish before he marched after the runaway gang leader. The lackeys stayed back again as he followed the blue scent trail through a few streets. Up ahead, he could see people in purple clothing running away from him. Jacko must have sent out a warning while he was running away. Shaggy ate another candy bar and kept an eye peeled for any snipers. But nothing happened the entire trip except for a few civilians running this way and that. Shaggy ignored the non-combatants and kept moving until he reached one of the first decent houses he had ever seen in Undertown. It was a nice two-story wooden place. That kind of reminded him of the Freak's drug den, but nicer. It looked actually lived in and decently well cared for. The blue scent was leading him right to its front door, too. But if that wasn't enough of a clue, the 15 purple-coated gangsters standing outside its doors were a big tip-off. A few of the thugs even had assault rifles, and one up front had an old-fashioned pump shotgun at his side. They all raised their weapons as Shaggy approached. But he just grinned and kept moving. He even shifted his hands back to human and raised them up like he was giving up. Shaggy stared down the barrel of the shotgun and smiled. "You're right. I do not know who you are. But do you think that is something to brag about?" I mean, I bet at least one of you has heard about me. Shotgun guy kept staring at Shaggy, but the others all glanced around. They all shared confused looks and then stared back at Shaggy. Clearly, none of them had heard of him. Shotgun guy took another step closer as Shaggy dropped the grin from his face and pretended to be affronted. Why do they always get close when they have a ranged weapon? Shaggy thought as he widely gesticulated with his hands. Oh, come on. No one? Well, that's great. Shaggy sprang into movement and slapped the barrel of the shotgun as hard as he could. It ripped from its owner's hands and spun in midair. Shaggy took advantage of his good luck and quickly grabbed the stock of the shotgun and pulled the trigger. The deafening boom of the shotgun was accompanied by a fountain of blood raining down on Shaggy. The gangsters all stared in horror as the shotgun guy's head disappeared and then they opened fire. Shaggy felt his body get peppered with a large range of bullets. He returned fire with his shotgun and tried to hit the guys with assault rifles. Shaggy waded forward as his healing went into overdrive. He could feel his flesh pushing out spent bullets as new ones replaced them. But each time Shaggy fired was another person who could no longer shoot him. So he kept up his war of attrition, safe in the knowledge that his enhanced healing would see him through. But after 3 shots, the damn shotgun was empty. Shaggy growled as he used the weapon as a club on the retreating gangsters. He noticed idly that all of them were human as he batted a few with the shotgun. A few were retreating toward the house, but the front doors appeared locked. Apparently, Jacko was more than happy to let his crew wear Shaggy down. Done playing, Shaggy grew his claws and made quick work of the small-time gang. They had been more well-armed than most of the gangs they had come across. But Shaggy's healing was broken. Unless they had a ray gun of some kind, he wasn't going to worry. The toughest part ended up being having to chase down a few stragglers. But once he was down, he returned to the 2-story building to find his lackeys waiting outside. Yeah, boss. You're going to need some blood-repellent clothes or something, Rita said, looking Shaggy over. Shaggy nodded as he wiped his blood-stained hands on his blood-sodden pants. Or maybe I can wear all red? The others all smiled at him as he moved toward the house. Blobby was digesting a few bodies as Vic and the others went through pockets. Shaggy tried the doorknob to the house, but it was still locked and a quick shove showed it was also barricaded. He sighed as he started clawing up the door and calling out to the gang leader. Jacko. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I have some questions for ya. A gunshot went off from inside the house, but that was the only answer. Shaggy grunted as his claws cut into the wood. Yuki moved up next to Shaggy and pointed at his own wrist, mockingly. Man, this sure is taking you a while. Yuki joked. Shaggy grunted. Please. There was no time component to our little bet. So just sit back and make yourself useful. Go get us all some drinks or something. Yuki was about to snap back when the world shook again. This time, Shaggy lost his balance and went down to the floor. The chunks from the front door he'd been cutting fell with him, landing in a pile on the porch. Shaggy righted himself and looked around as the whole underground cavern of Undertown shook. Some sprinkles of dirt even fell from the nearby east wall. Just as quickly, the earth stopped shaking and Shaggy glanced at his lackeys. Okay. Once I am done here, we're heading back to the bar. Something's up. No one disagreed with him, not even Yuki, as they all stared at the ceiling of the Undertown cavern. Shaggy ducked through the half-broke front door of the house and made his way through the front hallway. There was a set of stairs leading up, but Shaggy checked the downstairs first. He found a kitchen, a dining room, a living room, and a bathroom, but no Jacko. So he headed upstairs. A low voice hit his ears just as he cleared the last step. He twisted his head, trying to hear the voice, but it was too quiet. He walked over toward the door the noise was coming from, doing nothing to mask his steps. A loud bang and chips of wood went flying as he got in front of the door. He felt the large bullet take another chunk of both him and his armor. At this point, Shaggy was amazed the Kevlar-lined armor was even still hanging on. It had taken a beating. "He's here. You have to help me." That was the deal. Jacko screamed frantically from inside the room. Shaggy burst through the already broken door and fell upon the large, muscular man. Jacko had been standing next to a nightstand by a large bed. So Shaggy flung himself over the bed and easily tore into the man. Blood oozed over the nightstand and bed as Jacko dropped a weird silver device. Shaggy stomped it without a second thought. Whoever was on the other end of that device didn't need to know about him and his guys. Shaggy dug through Jacko's clothes and collected a large amount of credits chips. Before he left, he also collected the smashed communicator Jacko was using. Maybe they could find a tech guy to make them some phones out of it or something. Shaggy made it back out to the front of the building and handed everything over to Tom. "Okay. That's it. We are out of here, people. Let's go figure out what all T." Shaggy was cut off as another earthquake sent them all to the ground. This time, the shaking seemed to crescendo, and a loud crash resounded from above. It sounded like glass breaking as Shaggy and the others all stared upward. Clumps of dirt fell as man-sized holes appeared in the roof of Undertown. Shaggy thought he saw movement as more and more holes appeared in Undertown's sky. "What the hell are those?" one of his lackeys asked. Shaggy was about to shake his head as the shaking grew more and more and something slammed into the house behind him. The roof cracked under the weight of whatever hit it and Shaggy heard something slammed into the floor of the two-story house. He rushed inside, followed by the lackeys. Shaggy rounded the corner into the living room and swore. Laying in a crater, having gone through a roof and 2 floors and into the dirt underneath the house, was a large Omega automaton from Cog's lair. The thing was in pieces, but Shaggy would recognize their large wrecking ball fists from anywhere. Behind him, the lackeys all gasped at the sight of the bronze metal robot. Shaggy groaned and rushed back outside. Looking up, he recognized hundreds upon hundreds of Cog automatons crawling through the holes in Undertown's roof. Shaggy began grabbing every gun he could find and jamming them into the nearest lackey's hands. "Get as much shit as you can and book it back to the bar. They are going to need help." Yuki and the others all gazed around, looking shocked. "What the hell is going on?" Shaggy grinned. "Undertown's going to war with a supervillain." They ran. Shaggy and the lackeys ran through the still shaking streets of Undertown. Even as more Omega robots and bits and pieces of dirt fell from the sky. Even as random civilians panicked around them, screaming incoherently at the surrounding madness. They ran. Shaggy saw a few of the Omega robots pull themselves free of the wreckage of their landings and start attacking people. But he ignored them. Only stopping a few times to deal with the robots who got close to their group. Blobby had formed themselves into a ball and was rolling ahead of them, keeping the path clear. Tom and Rita tried to argue for them to stop and help, but ultimately, this wasn't their neighborhood. To Shaggy's mind, they had to get back to the bar and help defend it. Not only could they consolidate their power that way, but they could also be seen by their own neighborhood as protectors while all this madness was going on. So Shaggy ordered his lackeys to keep their heads down and keep running. They had a long couple of blocks to go before they were home. Shaggy dragged his claws through an Omega that had gotten close and turned a corner to see even more of the things destroying someone's metal home. The occupants were nowhere to be seen. Probably smashed to bits under the wrecking ball like hands of the Omegas. Shaggy charged forward and sliced with his claws, and bullets from his crew slammed home into the robot's armor plating. Shaggy ducked a wild swing and took the right leg off a robot as Blobby shouted from nearby. "Flyers incoming!" They pointed a tentacle upward as a loud buzzing filled the air. Shaggy let his crew deal with the flailing Omegas as he glanced up. In the sky, pouring out of the holes in the cavern walls, were bronze robots with rapidly fluttering metal wings on their backs. Each was around the size of a medium-sized dog and looked like giant feral cats with wings. They were diving, bombing the squat buildings of Undertown. Slashing at them with their teeth and claws. The sound of gunfire and spells filled the air as people of the streets fired upward, all doing their best to hit the surprisingly nimble targets. Even his guys were randomly shooting into the air, trying to hit something. Shaggy grunted and waved a hand at his crew. "If you don't hit 3 and 5 shots, save your ammo. We need to keep moving." The firing died down as most of his crew stopped shooting, except Sybil and Vic. They both reloaded and continued firing into the air. Sybil looked at Shaggy and nodded, which he took to mean they were ready to run again. Shaggy nodded back and waved Blobby forward, following the alien blue ball. Gunfire went off behind Shaggy as he heard the faint footsteps of his lackeys following him. They'd barely gone a block when they hit another group of robots. But this time they were completely foreign to Shaggy. The small rabbit-sized robots were using their large metal teeth to chomp into the flesh of a few dead bodies. The bodies were laying next to a pair of rifles, and nearby the form of one of the flying cats was on the ground broken. Shaggy's run took him directly in their path, and they immediately stopped their meal to jump at him and Blobby. The robot sank into Blobby's body and started to melt as Shaggy swung his claws wildly at the rabbit bots. He felt his claws rip through the hopping bastards, but one slammed into his stomach and started kicking and biting with its metal feet and teeth. Shaggy ripped the little bastard off and stomped on it as his crew caught up once again. He groaned as gunfire once again filled the air as they opened fire on the small rabbit bots. Boss?" Yuki said worriedly. He was standing next to the broken flying cat bot. The stocky lackey was staring down at the broken robot wide-eyed. Shaggy moved over next to the catbot and swore. There was a small box-shaped carrying cage next to the bot. It lay open and broken on the ground next to the catbot. The flying cat had multiple holes in it from gunfire and was obviously not working anymore, but its mission was done. Now there were multiple rabbit bots loose on the street. "Does that mean what I think it means?" Gorge asked. Shaggy nodded as Relsh answered. "Yep. Some of these damn things are carrying payloads. So even if we shoot them down, we have to deal with the rats. They look like rabbits to me," Seacrass said as he picked up a broken rabbit bot and studied it. "Rabbit. Rat. It doesn't matter. These things are going to be everywhere," Yuki screamed. Shaggy snorted and pointed upward at the robots still crawling the upper walls of Undertown. "They are already everywhere. All we have to do is get to the bar and muster a defense. I really don't see how a half-built bar is going to help us, boss," Tom said fearfully. "Maybe it won't, but at least we'll all be back in familiar territory with allies. Dave had the rest of the lackeys their training, and we have our little energy rifle insurance policy." The lackeys stared at him uncomprehendingly. But Shaggy glanced around again and, seeing that the rabbit bots were dealt with, started running again. There were a few shouts behind him as the lackeys started running after him, but Shaggy waved over his shoulder at them to follow. Blobby rolled up next to him, and the two of them kept pace as they moved further south. Random potshots from his crew still going off. "Damn it, Vic. You're just dropping more problems down on people. Stop." Rita panted as she ran. Vic's calm voice was interspersed with gunfire. "We have to deal with the flying cats, anyway. Plus, if we don't do it, someone else will," Sybil called. "So let them. Save our ammo," Zaliran argued. "And let one of those damn things drop on us? At least this way we can stop them dumping a load of rabbit rats on us," Vic shouted back. The arguing died down after that, and Shaggy smiled as more shooting picked up. Around them, more and more Omega robots fell from the sky. Shaggy questioned Cog's intelligence for a little while until he saw the smaller sword robots climbing the walls down toward the edges of Undertown. The Omegas were just the shock force. The sword bots were the actual force meant to sweep through them. Shaggy wondered if the damn mad scientist had anything else up his sleeve. The cat and rabbit bots had been a surprise. He also thought about what Cog was hoping to accomplish. Did he want to move into Undertown and take it over? Was he looking for Shaggy to get revenge? Maybe Cog wanted to test out some new robots. Shaggy sliced the head off a crippled Omega as he ran past a collapsed building. He shook off the errant thoughts and picked up speed. They were almost home. The last couple of blocks were pretty much the same. More and more Omegas fell from the sky as cat and rabbit bots roamed the street and skies. Although Shaggy noticed that there were fewer civilians out and about. That just meant the Omegas went unimpeded as they knocked down buildings everywhere they went. Shaggy and the others waged a running battle as some Omegas zeroed in on their little group. They had just made it to the square in front of their bar when the shaking finally stopped. The rumbling and quaking of the earth was replaced with mechanical whirring and clanking of metal. Screams sounded from all around as Shaggy let his focus skill take in everything. Dave's group of lackeys were in the half-built bar, firing their guns at the encroaching robots. Ren and Tinsel were in the square with a few more lackeys, duking it out with some Omegas. His group had entered from the north side of the square, dragging even more Omegas into the fight. Shaggy spun and charged the few Omegas, following them as he screamed. "Get to the bar and play defense. I'll help clear the square. Blobby, see what's going on with the dash." He was cut off as a green beam of energy slammed home into a nearby Omega and melted its chest plate. Shaggy grinned and waved the others toward the bar. That answered the question about the energy rifles. As he danced around the larger Omega robots and sliced away at them with his claws, the occasional beam of energy would hit an Omega. Shaggy heard Ren and Tinsel beating the Omegas with their bare hands and Ren's new hammer. The thing left huge dents on the sides of the Omegas, but they kept coming. Shaggy thought he saw a few lackeys in the square, using the professor's weapons, the large robots. But he had to focus on his own fights. The things weren't fast, but he was willing to bet they hit like runaway cars. He dodged back away from a large, round fist as he heard his name being called. Shaggy ignored it as he leapt on top of the wrecking ball-shaped hand and dove at an Omega's squat rectangular face. His claws hit the red glass eye of the Omega and shredded through what he considered the thing's head. He took stock of himself before he turned to the still screaming voice. "Shags." He turned and saw Ephemera and Slink yelling at him from the front door area of the bar. Shaggy shrugged and waved a clawed hand at the Omega robots that were still fighting in the square. Gunshots came from the bar, pinging off the robots' bronze armor. Ephemera and Slink were adamant, though, waving at him to come to them. Shaggy sighed and ran over, taking a few swipes at whatever he could. "We have a problem," Slink said as Shaggy skidded to a halt in front of them. Both Shaggy and Ephemera glared at the young kid. But Slink corrected himself. "Another big problem. Our ammo is getting low." Shaggy glanced into the bar and saw that not only were there lackeys firing away at the oncoming robots, but there were even a few civilians in their bar shooting. Nearby, Frank and his builders were rapidly putting up metal walls into the framework of the building for defense as some lackeys and civilians helped. Shaggy saw that there were even a few injured laying on the ground in the bar. "We have a solution, but we're going to have to go south," Ephemera said. Shaggy raised an eyebrow as Slink drew a pistol and started shooting at an approaching Omega. Another green beam melted the thing before it got too close, but Slink kept shooting. Ephemera jerked the gun out of the kid's hand and continued explaining. "The Needle Sisters are on their way here with some ammo and supplies." Shaggy grunted. "Gee, that's nice of them." When all this started, the Raku went after the sisters. They want Rashi for her healing powers, but the sisters escaped, and they are headed this way. But the Raku are chasing them. "Don't they have anything better to do?" Shaggy asked, waving at the robots in the sky and in the streets. Ephemera shrugged. "She's a healer. I think you know how valuable they can be in a situation like this." Slink closed his eyes and put a finger to his temple. "Actually, the Raku are doing pretty well for themselves. They've got the numbers and the guns. The Freaks and the UGB have joined forces and are fighting in the west. But Larry hasn't seen the Quinnica anywhere. I have Curly watching the Needle Sisters. They are staying ahead of the racks, but they need help. Shaggy shook his head in amazement. Geez, kid. When did you get the range? Slink smiled. Practice. Shaggy glanced around. His own people were doing okay, but gunshots were getting fewer and fewer. He was surprised to see a few lackeys drop their empty guns and run out into the square to fight with whatever weapons he could grab. Then again, what else were they going to do? Even if they ran away, they'd still be in a war zone. Shaggy reached into his pocket for another candy bar, but came away empty-handed. He groaned as he wiped his face. Fine, let's get going before I wise up. Let me grab some food first, though. Bars tapped except for beer. Ephemera grinned. Shaggy had to suppress the urge to howl in anger. Slink looked apologetic as he started moving toward the south. Shaggy pointed at Wren and nodded at Ephemera. Let him know where we are going. She returned the nod and patted his bare shoulder. You be careful out there. The racks may be doing okay for themselves, but that doesn't mean robots aren't still falling from the sky. Shaggy just grunted and ran after Slink. All around them, bullets flew and people screamed. Above them, omegas fell from the sky as the swordbots climbed their way closer downward toward the town. Catbots buzzed around on their metal wings and smashed their bodies into buildings, setting loose their rabbitbot payloads. Shaggy felt the grin start on his face, and he laughed as he ran. Shaggy felt his claws rend through metal as he slashed another omegabot. He and Slink were still running through the twisty streets of Undertown, heading for the Needle Sisters. Slink was leading the way and doing his best to dodge the large omegabots falling from the sky. The boy kept Shaggy up to date on the location of the sisters. His snake, Curly, was apparently watching them as they moved. Shaggy ducked a wild haymaker from another omegabot and kept running. The mindless automatons seemed to ignore them if they got far enough. But if you veered too close, they would smack you with their wrecking ball-shaped hands. Shaggy's own claws could easily slice through the bot's bronze armor, but they didn't have the time to fight every one of the damn things. Slink slid to a halt ahead of him and Shaggy used the short stop to slash the arm off a nearby omega. He pushed the kid's shoulder, trying to get him to move. Slink shook his head and slowly started running again as he spoke up. The sisters are under attack. Curly? Shaggy asked as he dodged a collapsing wall. Yeah, the racks look like they are more interested to grabbing the sisters than they are fighting the omegas. But, Shags. What? Talani's leading the racks after the sisters. Slink panted. Shaggy chuckled as he patted his empty pockets. Well shit. So I got no food, robots are falling from the sky, and we're heading right toward the one man I have pissed off the most down here? This is going to be great. Slink smiled. Least you have me? Shaggy just laughed harder as he kept running. The kid was getting better, but he wasn't exactly who Shaggy wanted in a fight. At most, he would prefer Vlad, or Wren, maybe even. Hey, where the hell was Dave back there? Slink panted loudly for a bit before he answered. He was protecting the civilians inside the bar. They really seemed to trust him. Of course, when the bots first showed up, he ran out there and started gathering the people to the bar. Just can't shake the hero out of him, can we? Shaggy laughed as he glanced around. Slink tapped his shoulder and pointed southwest, before responding. Nope. But, hey, that may be a good thing for us. Every company needs a front man and Dave's got charisma. Shaggy started running in the direction Slink pointed and agreed. True. But we can discuss a marketing deal with him later. Where are the sisters? Slink brought a finger to his temple and slowed down a bit. Shaggy kept an eye on their path as Slink communed with his snake. Or whatever he did with his snakes. Slink came back to himself and pointed while saying. They are fighting a running battle with the racks a little further south. Talani's following after, but the sisters are giving them a run for their money. At least Leslie, April and Vera are, Flora and Rashi are running as fast as they can. Wait, Shaggy said, thinking of the pink-haired Flora. Can't Flora teleport? What the hell is she doing? Why doesn't she just port them out of there? Slink shrugged as he ran. I don't know, Shags. But we can ask them here in a bit. Slink raised an incredulous eyebrow and stared at Shaggy. Clearly the boy did not believe Shaggy could do anything quietly. Shaggy coughed into his hand and started to walk toward where Slink said the sisters were. He kept an eye on the still falling Omegas, but he thought that the bots were becoming more scarce as time went on. Soon, the sword bots on the walls were going to come down and all of this would start again. The damn cat bots were still up there flying around every which way, dropping their payload of rabbit bots whenever they crashed into a building or got shot down. Shaggy thanked the gods of gaming that none of the damn things had gotten in their way yet. Although if they had, the Omegas would probably stomp them out of existence. Shaggy had seen a cat bot fly into an Omega a few times now. The damn bots didn't seem able to tell friend from foe. Shaggy's thoughts were interrupted by the sounds of gunfire and shouting. There had been intermittent gunfire going off throughout Undertown. But this was clearly an automatic rifle and it was not followed by the loud clanging of a bot being hit. Shaggy was also sure he could make out a few women voices in the tumult. So Shaggy stopped where he was and silently indicated for Slink to climb a nearby building. It wasn't exactly a safe spot, with a few Omega bots still dropping. But Shaggy checked that the coast was clear as best he could before he jumped onto a building and waited. The ominous buzzing of the flying catbot's wings droned overhead a few times. But they were soon drowned out by a running battle that was taking place on the streets. Shaggy and Slink crouched down low on the roof they were on and watched as the Needle Sisters and Racco got closer. Rashi was running ahead of the other sisters, half carrying a slumped-over Flora. April, Vera, and Leslie were following close behind, throwing various powers at their pursuers. April would wave her hand and nearby buildings would collapse and Racco thugs would go flying backward. Dara was shooting beams of energy out her hands as Leslie shot bolts of electricity in every direction. Shaggy glanced at Slink, who was collecting a small green snake from the roof. You didn't say Flora was injured. Also, where the hell is Chromia in all of this? Slink shuddered as Curly returned to his body. Chromia went off to scout by herself. Ephemera was being a little harsh on her, so I thought it best to split them up. As for Flora, I didn't know. My snakes only tell me what I ask of them. I wanted to know where the Needle Sisters were. So Curly told me. He has no frame of reference for an unconscious person and a conscious one. My boys are just babies, you know? Shaggy stared at Slink as the boy rubbed the fleshy protrusion on his arm where Curly was. He shuddered as he turned back to the fight. He really didn't want to learn more about the young boy and his snakes. The Racco thugs were diving all over the place, dodging the sisters' attacks while firing their assault rifles and Tommy guns. None of them seemed brave enough to rush them and Shaggy couldn't really blame them. The sisters were throwing around some power, but that could only go on for so long. Shaggy kept an eye out for Tilani as the fight grew even with their building. Their building was in real danger of being knocked over by one of the sisters' powers. But a blast of magma shot out from the back of the Racco thugs. A few of the more unfortunate ones were caught in the wave. Their screams and the sound of them sizzling filled the small street everyone was standing on, almost eclipsing the sound of the bots still trudging about the place. The source of the magma moved in its wake, adjusting his suit as he did. Well, my fine ladies, this has been fun. But this needs to stop now, Tilani said calmly as he played with steaming magma in his right hand. He raised a hand and all the gunfire coming from the Racco stopped. Tilani's face went red with anger and Shaggy was sure the man was going to blast more magma at the sister. But contrary to expectation, the gangster just sighed again and looked up at the large cavern roof of Undertown. More and more Omegas were still dropping while their cat and sword cousins poured over the walls and sky. Tilani lit a cigarette and puffed out a small plume of smoke. You know, Undertown's protections have lasted hundreds of years. So they say. But in a few short weeks Undertown loses a member of the Big Five, the freaks fall into a civil war, the Quinnica go radio silent entirely, and now the protective wards surrounding this hellhole have given out. Now we find ourselves beset on all sides by an unknown enemy. Shaggy and everyone else stared at the suited man as he spoke. Tilani was almost reverent in the way he spoke about the chaos around them. Shaggy swore he could see a twinkle in the stocky man's eyes. Tilani spun in a circle and gesturing at the falling robots and the destruction they were bringing on Undertown. Shaggy felt a tapping on his arm and turned to see Slink pointing at the air above Tilani's head. A catbot was soaring around, looking for a target. Shaggy grinned, but it quickly faded as he remembered he gave all his guns to his lackeys. But Slink seemed to notice the problem, because he waved a small pistol under Shaggy's nose. "Where did you get that?" "Ephemera took your gun," Shaggy whispered. Slink snorted. "Did you think that was my only one?" Shaggy grinned as he took off the remaining bits of his armor. It had served him well, if not long, but he still didn't want it to get shredded when he shifted. Slink watched him for a bit until he realized Shaggy was getting completely naked. The boy turned and started to aim at the hovering catbot. "Soon as you hit, I'll rush him. You lead the sister back to the bar." Slink looked up from his aiming. "Are you sure about that? Tilani's throwing magma around and you're out of snacks." "Nope. This is an absolutely terribly idea." "Par for the course, then. At least you're consistent." Slink chuckled quietly. Slink went back to aiming his gun as Tilani still pontificated in the street below. Shaggy noticed that all the sisters had gathered together and were glaring at the encroaching Raku forces. Slink was muttering something under his breath. But Shaggy could barely hear it as he focused on his own change. As his head and face changed shape, though, he could just make out what the kid was saying, and he had to really focus in order to avoid laughing. "Don't miss. Don't miss. Don't miss. Don't miss. Don't miss. Don't miss." Bam! Shaggy took off like a shot at the sound of Slink's gun, bolting over the edge of the building and running past the Needle sisters. Leslie even threw another wild bolt of electricity at him as he ran. But Shaggy ignored it as it whizzed over his head and ran straight for Tilani, who was still giving a speech to his assembled crew. But Slink's gunshot had brought the gangster's attention back around. His eyes went wide as he saw Shaggy barreling at him and even conjured some red-hot magma in his hand. But Slink's shot hit its mark. The hovering catbot above Tilani tilted dangerously in the air and started falling to the ground. The catbot followed its programming as it fell and released its payload of deadly rabbit robots. They fell on top of Tilani and a few more nearby men just as Shaggy crashed into their line. Gunshots started going off again as Shaggy leapt up and slammed both of his paws into Tilani's chest. Shaggy bit forward as they both tumbled to the ground. Behind him, he heard shouts and gunfire going off, as well as the Needle sisters firing away with their own powers. He even felt a few bullets slam into him as they rolled. He took several shots as he and Tilani wrestled, as well as a few scratches from the rabbit bots they were rolling around with. His wounds weren't healing as quick as they normally did, and Shaggy was starting to worry. Not only that, but Tilani's skin didn't feel right under his paws. It felt closer to putty than actual skin, and when Shaggy snapped his jaws forward into the gangster's face, he was overwhelmed with pain. His fangs and mouth felt like they were burning. They went tumbling down the street as Shaggy tried to pull away from Tilani, but the Raku captain kept a hold of him. Shaggy twisted and turned, trying to rid himself of the burning sensation in his mouth. He finally dislodged the stocky gangster by rolling over repeatedly in the dirt. But that did nothing for the pain in his jaws and teeth. Soon, he was forced to transform back into his human shape to rid himself of the pain. Getting into the calm headspace the transformation needed was a challenge, but luckily, he pulled it off. But then he was on his knees near Tilani, who, for the most part, looked perfectly fine. His suit wasn't even dirty. Shaggy grimaced as he guessed what the captain's power was. Tilani smiled as he waved a hand at some nearby Raku grunts. They had moved to help their captain as he and Shaggy rolled down the street. but Tilani was waving them off, back toward the Needle Sisters. Tilani's clothes and skin roiled as red liquid magma boiled to the surface. You should always identify your opponent's weakness and strengths before barreling forward like that. Shaggy grunted as he stood. He was still in a good amount of pain from rolling the dirt, biting a man made of pure magma. But his pain suppression was doing its job and he could ignore most of it. Yeah, not really my thing. I'm more of an idiot, really. Shaggy grinned as he waited for his regeneration to finish. It was slowing down noticeably. I've noticed. Tilani said, pulling another cigarette from his coat. You know, you and your lot have been a useful way for me to get rid of the non-believers in my outfit. I figured a batch of highly armed guys would stomp right through you kids. But color me surprised. Shaggy brushed the dirt off of his nude body and groaned as he listened to Tilani. Please save the monologuing for someone who cares. I just want to kick your ass. Tilani raised his eyebrows as he drew on his cigarette. Nearby, the sounds of shouts and gunfire were still going off. Shaggy was sure he could hear the sounds of the Needle Sisters' powers still going as well. Finally, Tilani nodded and threw the remains of his cigarette in the dirt. Have it your way, dog. The gangster threw both of his arms forward and launched streams of roiling magma straight at Shaggy. Shaggy dove, rolling through the dirt and transforming his hand into his claws, and he charged bare ass, right at a man made completely out of fire. He couldn't keep the smile from his face as he charged past Tilani, who remained stock still at his approach. He swung both of his claws through the air and into Tilani's chest, feeling the cut through the jelly-like substance his body was made of. Shaggy grimaced as the magma in the man's body ate away at his claws. He withdrew his claws and jumped back as Tilani turned and shot another stream of magma from his hands. Shaggy dodged as best he could, rolling through the dirt and debris of the small street they were fighting in. Luckily, a lot of the surrounding buildings had been knocked down, either by the sisters or the still falling Omegas. Cooling magma collected in line on the dirt street as Shaggy got out of the way of another blast. Tilani was cackling as he kept up a steady stream of the burning liquid. Shaggy was too busy watching his feet and the magma to get close enough to attack. Shaggy belatedly thought about needing some ranged attacks, but a stream of magma hit his shoulder and he quickly brought his focus back to the fight. He brushed off the magma and rolled in the dirt before it did too much damage. He came out of the roll and leapt forward, trying to get close to Tilani, but he maintained his stream of fire like a firefighter hosing down a house. He has to have a limit. Shaggy grumbled mentally. Nearby, he spotted a thin piece of sheet metal and moved to grab it as he dodged another stream. He had to jump across a few trails of magma in the street, but he made it to his target and lifted it sideways as best he could and spun in place. After a full rotation, he tossed it toward Tilani, expecting the gangster to dodge out of the way. But instead, Tilani watched the thin missile barrel right at him. The piece of sheet metal lodged itself in Tilani's stomach and immediately started melting as the captain grinned maliciously at Shaggy. Shaggy humped in annoyance as he looked around for something else to throw, but Tilani's jeering filled his ears again. Shaggy ignored the jabs as he spotted a thicker piece of metal nearby. He made a beeline for it as Tilani continued to goad him. But a stream of magma flew straight in front of his vision and Shaggy had to jump out of the way again as his chosen weapon melted in the dirt. Tilani gave a theatrical sigh and looked ready to start talking again, when a loud thump resounded in the street. An Omega had landed nearby and was pulling itself from its self-made crater. Shaggy heard Tilani grumble in annoyance as he turned to deal with the new threat. Shaggy could have cheered, but as he started to run, a shadow fell across him. He looked up the street and came to a skidding halt as a metal woman with an eye patch was standing in his path. Shaggy sighed and rethought all of his decisions in-game as he grew his claws and glared at Chromia. The metal woman glared at him as behind him, he heard Tilani hoot in triumph. The sound of roiling magma and melting metal filled the air as Shaggy marched forward. Really should have killed her when I had the chance. Stupid familial sentimentality. Shaggy was ready to lunge when Chromia threw a plastic bag at his feet. Shaggy hadn't even noticed the bag when he was walking forward. Chromia gave his naked body a quick scan before she snorted and turned around. Shaggy tried not to feel affronted as he noticed the bag was full of chips and candy. He had to stop himself from cheering. "We're even now, Dogman. I'm going to help my new sisters escape. You hold back Tilani. If you could do me a favor and both kill each other, that would be great," Chromia said as she turned and walked off back the way she had come. Shaggy shoved a handful of chips into his mouth and shouted back, "Ah, I knew you liked me. Make sure Slink gets back too, please. Little guy was trying to help your sisters." Chromia's response was to flip him the bird and keep walking. Shaggy heard Tilani give an indignant shout, and he turned to look. He was surprised to see the melted bodies of 3 Omegas and even a few rabbit bots laying in the dirt around the gangster. Slowly, cooling magma almost filled the streets. Tilani was glaring at him as a rabbit bot that was submerged in Tilani's stomach kicked its legs weakly. The rabbit bot melted in half and fell away as Shaggy tipped a full bag of candy into his mouth. Shaggy chewed rapidly and gave Tilani what he was sure was a chocolatey grin. He could somehow feel his regeneration kicking back into full gear. He still wanted a bar or something that would let him keep track. So he had a more concrete idea of how much healing he had left. Maybe he would write to the game company. He and Tilani glared at each for what felt like minutes as Shaggy jammed as much food into his mouth as he could. Tilani's arms bulged and bubbled as they lost their normal suit-covered look. Instead, they were replaced with red masses of bubbling fire and magma. "Well, at least you won't die hungry," Tilani growled as his arms burbled and boiled. Shaggy wiped the chip dust and chocolate off his mouth as best he could. He was pretty sure he just smeared a lot of it around, though. Not the way he wanted to charge into battle, with his mouth and face covered in chocolate and crumbs. But what the hell? Shaggy threw his trash on the street and crouched low, growing his claws and glaring menacingly at Tilani. The gangster's face and skin were red with suppressed anger, and Shaggy was sure Tilani was going to throw both arms at him. Their standoff ended as Tilani drew both his arms back, summoning massive amounts of magma into his arms. Shaggy grinned wolfishly at the gangster and then charged. Tilani thrust his magma arms forward, sending a large wave of magma straight at him. Shaggy debated whether or not to jump the wave, but he didn't want to create an easier target for Tilani, so he changed direction and moved around the magma wave. But Tilani was waiting anyway. A stream of magma slammed right into Shaggy's torso as he dodged around the wave. Shaggy felt his feet leave the ground as the solid stream picked him up and threw him backward. He could feel his skin healing as the magma ate away at him. He rolled in the dirt and wiped the magma as best as he could as he tried to keep an eye on Tilani. His healing would not last long with the constant damage over time Tilani's magma doled out. The food had gone a long way to helping him, but he still had a distance problem when it came to fighting the damn gangster. He just couldn't get close enough. Shaggy shook off that thought. Even if he closed the gap, the man's body was pure magma. He would still be taking damage. He just needed to play keep away for as long as possible and buy the others enough time to run away. Shaggy had to dodge another large circular stream of magma as he thought about playing keep away. He could see the gangster's red face glowering at him from behind his massive arms of magma. Shaggy grinned at Tilani and raised a middle claw. Tilani roared in anger as his arms of magma bloated and then disgorged themselves onto the street. Shaggy ran southward, away from where the sisters and Slink were fighting. As he did, his attention was again drawn upward. While the Omegas falling out the sky had slowed considerably, there were still a few coming down. Shaggy almost laughed as he thought of a way to mess with Tilani. Keeping an ear out, Shaggy listened for any signs of nearby destruction. It didn't long to find what he was looking for and, with Tilani in hot pursuit, Shaggy ran straight toward the sound. Tilani screamed incoherently as Shaggy ignored him. He found an Omega steadily beating its way through a small brick hut and got its attention as he glanced back toward Tilani. The captain was glaring straight at Shaggy and drawing his arms back for another shot of magma. He had to roll out of the way again as the stream hurtled through the air and collided right into the back of the bronze robot. Shaggy grimaced as the bot's whole torso was covered in roiling magma. But the bot, seemingly undisturbed, turned its attention to Tilani and trundled toward the gangster. Shaggy's frown became a feral grin as Tilani changed his target to the bot. The air grew hotter as Tilani focused both arms on the approaching Omega, melting the thing down to scrap. But Shaggy was already looking for another pawn to throw at Tilani. Maybe if he was lucky, the gangster would wear himself out. Shaggy heard another loud crash coming from the west and turned toward it. But another surge of magma crossed in front of him. "Oh no, we are not playing that game, dog. Hurry and die already!" Tilani screamed. Shaggy turned to see the gangster running forward with both arms extended. Bubbling masses of magma churning as he tried to shoot more. That was when Shaggy noticed that Tilani had a hard time moving and shooting at the same time. He had to almost throw his arms around to get any distance with his magma. Filing that bit of information away, Shaggy barreled around another line of magma, feeling the hot air scorch his skin. It healed quickly as he ran westward, Tilani's screams drawing another grin to his face. At the very least, he was annoying the asshat, and annoyed people could get angry, and angry people became stupid real fast. Shaggy pushed his way through a narrow space between two brick and metal buildings as Tilani kept up his indignant shouting. He felt a wave of magma slam into the walls of the buildings, and a geyser of hot magma slapped into his back and burned his skin. Shaggy ducked into a forward roll and brushed off the boiling clump as he ignored the pain. He came up in the middle of another dirt street, but this one was full of Omegas and even a few catbot floating in the air. The bodies of civilians lay strewn around the ground, bloody and beaten. Apparently, the Raku weren't defending their territory as much as people thought. Shaggy gave a jaunty wave as the bots turned to him all at once. Tilani was squeezing his amorphous form through the alley Shaggy had just come through as the bots charged. Shaggy backpedaled as Tilani turned at him, face apoplectic with rage. He had to keep the smile off his face as Cog's robots aimed straight at the nearest target, Tilani. They fell on the suited gangster in droves, all attacking with little concern for if their allies got in the way. Shaggy watched as an Omega swung its massive wrecking ball hand straight through a catbot and into Tilani's torso. The gangster grunted as the bot's arm got slowed to a stop in Tilani's jelly-like body. The massive arm was melting away as rabbit bots pounced straight into Tilani's chest and legs, using their sharp feet and teeth to tear away the gangster's skin. Shaggy continued to back up as he watched Tilani's body morph and conform with each blow and scratch from the robots. Every bot was slowly being melted away the more they struck at the gangster, and Tilani didn't seem to get tired at all. In fact, the angrier the man got, the hotter he seemed to burn as he threw armfuls of magma at his attackers. Shaggy was about to make another break for it when a catbot dive-bombed him. The cat's long claws scratched a long gouge in his arm as he used it to defend his face. He swore as he noticed several rabbit and catbots were angling to attack him as well. He kicked a leaping rabbit bot out of the air and toward Tilani as he watched the hovering catbots. As soon as the next one dove at him, Shaggy raised a clawed hand and jammed it into the thing's rapidly moving wings. He ignored the pain of his hand getting mangled and grabbed hold of one of the cat's front paws. As the bot's wings stopped, Shaggy tossed it toward Tilani. It hit the dirt right in front of the gangster as he was melting down another Omega. 7 rabbit bots leapt out and attacked Tilani's legs, and Shaggy cackled as he sliced up another rabbit bot, throwing its metal carcass into Tilani's bubbling body. The surrounding air became almost unbreathable as Tilani heated up like an oven. Shaggy could feel sweating rolling off of him as he continued to throw every bot he killed into the Tilani's magma form. Shaggy was sure the gangster was losing its cohesion of his amorphous body as Omegas swung through him repeatedly. He wasn't sure anymore if it was a good idea, but with the way Tilani was become more and more of a red blobby, he would not stop anytime soon. After he had tossed the next catbot, though, Tilani exploded. Literally. Magma shot out in every direction as Tilani's magma body bubbled and lost all of its shape. Tilani was no longer shaped like a humanoid, but was now nothing more than an amorphous red magma blob. Pieces of robots fell into Tilani's new body, boiling and burning with a red-hot fire that spread around the dirt-filled street. Shaggy sliced his claws through another leaping rabbit bot and glanced around. Most of the bots were melting as Tilani's magma form seeped in every direction. He stared at the mass as the sound of destruction and gunshots sounded in the distance. As the magma continued to roll across the ground, Shaggy looked awkwardly left and right. That's not how he saw the fight ending. Tilani didn't seem to have any drive anymore. It seemed like he had lost full cohesion and was now just a flat mass of magma. Shaggy scratched the back of his head as he coughed. Well, this is awkward. Shaggy spoke to the slow-moving body of lava. The red mass burbled at him and continued to creep around. Shaggy briefly tried to think of ways to finish the Raku captain, but nothing was coming to mind. He kicked some dirt on the thing and watched as it solidified over the top. Almost like a crust. Slightly emboldened, Shaggy grabbed fistfuls of dirt and poured them over the red mass. It took a few minutes, but soon the entire top layer of Tilani's amorphous form was covered in a black crust. Shaggy wasn't sure if it would do anything beyond being slightly annoying for the gangster, but he continued dumping dirt until he had practically buried the wide pool of lava. Well, Shaggy said, blowing out a breath and wiping the sweat from his brow. See you around, Tilani. You were an interesting boss fight. Let's do this again real soon. Don't call me, I'll call you. Shaggy chuckled to himself as he started jogging northward. The falling Omegas had pretty much stopped, but, not long from now, the sword bots would hit the streets. He wanted to be back to the bar before all that happened. He glanced back a few times, worried that Tilani would gather himself. But the Raku gangster stayed dormant as he ran away. Shaggy was examining his thoughts on the fight when a loud buzzing came from overhead. Fearing more catbots, Shaggy looked to Undertown's sky and was shocked to see a mass of new silver bots coalescing in the air above the center of Undertown. The swarm of bots swam through the air in every direction before they seemed to settle down and floated to a central location. After they did, the silver mass expanded outward, forming a large, slim silver screen. Shaggy blinked as the silver mass turned pale blue, and then an image appeared on the bot-created screen. He felt a shiver go up his spine as Cog's youthful face glared down at Undertown. An evil grin was plastered on the young bot-maker's face as his image was projected in the air for all on Undertown to see. Well, hello Undertown. Cog said, red robotic eye blazing with an eerie light. I want to thank all you wonderful dregs of Undertown for helping me rid myself of some baggage. Cog gloated as his eerie glowing blue face hung in the air. You know what they say, if you are going to throw something out, then why not give it to the less fortunate? So I bequeath unto you all my former failings. They served the old me rather well, but as you can see, I'm a brand new me now. Cog twisted his face left and right, giving those watching a clear view of his new, younger face. Shaggy ducked another diving catbot and kept one eye on the yapping head of Cog as he ran. Old bastard still loved to hear himself talk. Shaggy had stopped momentarily to grab some pants from an unfortunate civilian. But he still wanted to get back to the bar as fast as he could. Unfortunately, Cog may have started to monologue again, but that didn't mean his damn bots had stopped wreaking havoc. For those of you who lack the brain cells to identify your intellectual betters, I am Cog. Roboticist, mastermind, and future ruler of the world. You are no doubt wondering how my illustrious self has come to recapture my youth. But that is a tale for another time, also it is probably a tale better saved for those who can appreciate it. Anyway, I wanted to let you all know that this little spring cleaning episode was brought to you by me. Shaggy skidded to a stop in the street as a few Omegas ahead of him turned and started marching toward him. He ducked into an alley and headed east for a block before he curved northward again. Glancing at Cog, he noticed some people had taken to firing whatever weaponry they could at the tiny robots that made up the screen. Cog either didn't notice or care that his image was slowly being chipped away as he went right on talking. As for why I chose your particular location, well, that was several things. I recently came into contact with a few of Undertown's finest and we had a lovely time. So I figured we're better to dump my refuse than the garbage fire of a town that is Undertown? My new friends can play with my old toys, and I can deliver this message to your big five. Cog snorted a laugh as he derided the denizens of Undertown. Shaggy glanced at the cavern walls, checking how the swordbots were coming along. They had been slowly climbing down the walls since this whole thing began. Now that the Omegas were almost gone, their speedier sword-wielding brothers would be marching through the streets. At least the damn things were far more flimsy than the hulking Omegas. Shaggy thought he could see the clear square where the bar was located up ahead. The sounds of gunfire still resounded through the streets. But Cog's voice still boomed through the cavern. And that message is, stay in your little hole. Austin is going through some changes right now, and I don't want any low-tier garbage getting in my way. Once I am in charge, we can meet and maybe discuss your continued existence. But for now, play with my old toys, lick your wounds, and stay the fuck out of my city. Cog punctuated the end of his message with a scream that echoed throughout Undertown. More and more of the holo-projecting robots he was using to cast his image fell from the sky as more people fired up into Cog's projected face. Cog's glaring image started to deteriorate and fall to the ground as someone finally brought out the big guns. Magic and rocket fire slammed into Cog's face as the mad inventor finally cut the projection. The small silver robots whirled around and then dove into the arena square. Shaggy was sure he could hear screams and gunfire echoing through the entire city as those little silver bots went to work. He didn't know what they could do, and he didn't want to find out. As he passed another flattened house and rushed into the square in front of the bar, Shaggy had to skid to a stop. Two very unlikely people were making scrap metal out of the few Omegas that still wandered around. The old man NPC that smelled like motor oil and plastic, Obadiah, was ripping the arm off an Omega and using the wrecking ball to bludgeon another large robot. Nearby, Vance was in his beastman form, cutting through various robots like they were little more than leaves. Shaggy stared incredulously as he noticed most of his crew were in front of the bar, taking the odd potshot at nearby robots and drinking beer. Slink was outside the bar, talking to an excited Dave as civilians and lackeys milled about the place. A few people were monitoring the swordbots crawling the walls, but they seemed relaxed. Frank and his crew were still rapidly trying to build the bar with whatever pieces they could find. Ren and Tinsel were nowhere to be seen, but surprisingly, Vlad was standing at the entrance to the bar, talking to Leslie. The biker woman looked a little worn down, but unharmed. Shaggy blew out a breath as he walked over. What the hell? Is it break time? How come no one told me? Slink turned away from a wildly gesticulating Dave and smiled widely. Holy shit, I thought for sure you were dead. Vlad said goodbye to Leslie and moved to join them. Shaggy grabbed a shitty wooden mug and poured himself some water from a nearby jug. He nodded at Dave and Slink before he raised an eyebrow at Vlad. The vampire was topside when all this went down. Shaggy wondered what that must have looked like. Vlad grimaced and said, "It's a damn madhouse up there. Vigilante supers are flying every which way as the HLO guys try to pin them down. The player base is not happy with all the bureaucracy of the game and they are making themselves heard. Then you have this complete fiasco. Cog threw his old stuff at us, but topside got the cream of the crop. 7-foot-high silver metal skeletons wandering around the streets killing anyone who gets in their way, ants the size of bobcats roaming the streets outside of downtown. Then you have the supers trying to put a stop to it." Shaggy gulped down his water. "Least you made it out." Shaggy grimaced as Dave's excited voice almost yelled. "Nanties. Wicked. Although suffocating had to suck. Or not suck." They all stared at Dave as the grin fell off his face. Eventually, he coughed into his hand and waved for them to continue. Vlad just shook his head and glanced around. Obadiah and Vance were cleaning up the last of the Omegas. The pair of them had an Omega between them and they were almost gleefully tearing the thing apart by its arms and feet. Shaggy raised an eyebrow as Vlad explained. Obadiah was checking on the Brute clan. But they were doing fine, so he turned here. I don't know the other guy, Wolf. Werewolf sensei. Shaggy grinned. But where's Ren and Tinsel? They get ghosted? Slink shook his head. They are inside with Rashi. She's healing up the civvies. They both took a beating from the damn Omegas. Bruisers. Obadiah said, as he walked over and wiped the dust from his hands. The Supes and HLO call them bruisers. The smaller ones are called bladelings, if I recall. Never met those flying cats, though. But it's also been a while since I was in the HLO. Shaggy shrugged. I guess bladeling sounds better than swordbot. But Cog himself called the big ones Omegas. So I'm going to stick with that. What you need to do is stop worrying about what you call the damn things, and get out of here. The next wave is coming, and your boys ain't exactly the best of the bunch. Vance growled as he transformed back into his human form. They got it where it counts. Shaggy grumbled back as he walked into the bar. Frank and his guys were rapidly nailing bits of sheet metal into the frame of the building they had created. It didn't look pretty and probably wouldn't last very long, but anything between them and the enemy was a good thing. Ren and Tinsel were standing near the Needle Sisters, helping move the old and young citizens of Undertown to and from Rashi. Rashi was treating people on top of the one good table they had. Jabbing her long thin needles into their skin and using whatever power she had to seal up their wounds. Shaggy wasn't sure how long she had been at it, but he could already see sweat pouring down her face. Flora was up and about delivering water to random people. Both lackey and civilian alike. Chromia was watching over Rashi with an increasingly distressed look. One that changed to incredulity as Shaggy and his friends walked in. You killed him. Chromia shouted, unaware of how jumpy everyone else in the room was. Those in the room that could, jumped up from their chairs. Some grabbed weapons, while others looked like they wanted to hide. Shaggy rubbed the bridge of his nose as he shook his head. Rashi and Vera started berating an embarrassed Chromia as April dragged her away from the designated healing area. Chromia continued to look embarrassed until she caught Shaggy's eye again, and then she glared hatefully at him. Shaggy put his hands up in front of him and cackled. He waved for Ren to meet them behind the bar, away from the mass of people and lackeys. Chromia followed heatedly, obviously wanting to give Shaggy a piece of her mind. Obadiah moved to help wherever he could, but Vance remained outside. Shaggy remembered idly that the old werewolf didn't like crowds. Shaggy waved to Mr. Blue, who was standing next to the bar and talking to a few similar-looking aliens. They moved away as his group approached, and Shaggy raised an eyebrow. So what happened with Tilani? Slink interrupted his thoughts as the others all gathered around him near the bar. Shaggy shook his head. Oh yeah, so after I ran into him what the fuck? The others all jumped back, as did several NPCs in the room, as Shaggy stared at the glowing blue panel that had appeared in front of him. Congratulations. You have 5 members and the required lackeys within a decent structure. Would you like to create a legion at this time? A legion is a group of villains who work out of a particular structure and commit nefarious acts. Creating a legion will unlock certain lair benefits and will also allow for a communal pool of lackeys. The highest loyalty for each lackey shall be taken and shared among all founding legion members. Please access the nearby terminal to create your legion. How the hell hasn't this happened yet? Shaggy asked as the others made noises of surprise. They were probably getting the same notification he just got. He closed out the message window and let the others catch up. The surrounding NPCs went about their business while the few standing close enough to hear him just gazed at him quizzically. Their AI not allowing them to make sense of his conversation. Vlad was the first after Shaggy to finish the message, however, he didn't look ecstatic about it. What about our hideout? Well, we can have multiple hideouts. As criminals, that would make sense, but this would turn the bar into our main lair. I don't know if we can have multiples of those. Ren answered, wiping an invisible window out of the air. Vlad snorted and crossed his arms. But do we even want to do this right now? Shaggy punched the grumpy vampire in the arm. What the hell is wrong with you? Of course we do. We could get this bar built quicker. We wouldn't have to worry about those creepy-ass worms, and we wouldn't be in a damn underground tomb. Shaggy stopped as the reason Vlad was being moody became apparent. Oh, you can't be serious. You don't want to lose your dungeon? Vlad humphed, but said nothing as Slink and Dave finished reading. Slink had a bemused look at their conversation, but Dave seemed outright excited. Although that was pretty much his constant state. Ren put a massive gray hand on Vlad's shoulder and twisted the man till he was facing the big rhino man. Dude, this is a good thing. We can still work on the hideout. But honestly, we haven't been back there in a while. The bar is a better place for us. We can still dig downward. Maybe we can even connect the two somehow. We'd need more builders, or maybe the lair will have something. Slink added helpfully. Shaggy was about his own 2 cents when Dave nearly vibrated out of his skin. The young man was jumping around happily. Big grin plastered on his face. They all stared at the dark-haired man until he answered their questioning looks, still dancing around happily. Shaggy shook his head and chuckled. See, Vlad. You gotta do it. We can't disappoint Dave. That'd be like disappointing a puppy that can do karate. Vlad failed to stifle a laugh as they watched Dave's odd dance. Fine. But does this place even have a terminal? Also, your original question still stands. Why the hell is this happening now? Well, we haven't all been in the bar at the same time before. Have we? I don't know, but even if we had, most of the time the lackeys are outside so that Frank and his guys can do their work. We took shelter in here when the Omegas started dropping, and now here we all are. Slink posited. Shaggy thought about it for a bit. He wasn't sure if they had all been in the bar at the same time. But they rarely had so many lackeys in the bar at once. So maybe that was it? Ran and Vlad both looked thoughtful when he checked their faces. But Dave was noticeably absent. Shaggy glanced around for the extra hyper guy and found him running around the bar and toward the kitchen. Shaggy watched him dash in and then back out, before he turned toward Mr. Blue and Petra's office, near the kitchen door. The excitable Dave burst into and out of the door, a smile still on his face. Hey, guys. Is this the thingy? Dave asked, pointing a finger back into Petra and Blue's office. Shaggy shook his head at the excitable Dave as he and the others moved to look. Several of the NPCs moved as well. Their faces were still quizzical. Shaggy looked around the bar until he spotted Petra near a front wall, still holding the K-Tech laser rifle. She had been taking pot shots at flyers the whole time, apparently. Petra, we need our bank. We're, gonna secure our money. Shaggy yelled. Petra glanced behind her, before she looked at the K-Tech rifle sadly. She handed it off to Monroe and uttered some kind of warning that Shaggy couldn't hear. But Monroe nodded his head in agreement, looking terrified. He lost sight of Petra as they entered the small metal room. Its south-facing wall was gone entirely thanks to their rebuilding efforts. Which was probably a good thing, as all of them couldn't exactly fit in the room together. Especially with trying to squeeze Ren's bulky frame in. But sure enough. There was a standing silver terminal sticking out of the ground right next to Mr. Blue's old and cracked desk. It looked exactly like the one in their underground hideout. Slim, silver circular rod sticking out of the ground topped with a long keyboard-like computer terminal. Shaggy moved up to it as Dave hopped around excitedly. The holodisplay popped up as he got within range and he could see most of the same options they had gotten from the one below ground. Wait. Was this place a hideout too? The others glanced at each other until Ren shook his head. I don't think so. Maybe it turned up 'cause we can make a legion now. What's it say? Same as the other one. Building stuff, facilities, rooms, etc. All kinds of boring stuff. Shaggy said as he glanced over the various tabs. Finally, he found a tab that was previously grayed out and without a title. Now the tab read, Legion. Shaggy grinned as he hit the tab and was immediately taken to an image of the bar they were all standing in. The terminal also registered all 5 players currently standing within the office. Clicking the option to share the screen, Shaggy backed up as the holodisplay filled the room. They were presented with a count of the lackeys currently in the bar and the current structural integrity of the bar. Which was 32%? Man, that sucks, Shaggy whistled as he looked over the holographic recreation of the half-built bar. Enough to count as a structure. Apparently. Ren said, rubbing his chin and staring at the numbers. This says we have 30 lackeys? That can't be right. 30 in the bar, Slink corrected. Plus the few outside. Doesn't look like it's counting the Needle Sisters, though. Ren shook his head. Wow, I didn't know we were that big. Vlad nodded as he reached up to touch something on the holographic display. Still nowhere near as big as the big 4 down here, though. Not to mention topside. That's where the real big boys play. All the more reason to do this. Shaggy said as he gratefully took the bag of credit chips from an impatient-looking Petra. The scaled woman practically threw them at Shaggy before she raced back to her favorite rifle. So what do we gotta, oh there it is. Shaggy said as a window popped into his view again. Man, he hated that. Notification. Vlad Kopish has requested to form a legion with you. The structure and design of the legion can all be edited through the legion menu in your closest hideout's terminal. Founding legion members will also need to select a hideout to use as their lair. A lair is an enhanced hideout with many more options, including ones for defense, offense, training, and entertainment areas. All lackeys under every member of the Legion will be added to a communal pool. Accept invite? Yes/no? Shaggy quickly pressed yes and waited, but nothing happened. When he glanced up, he saw the others all looking around. Disappointed looks were also on their faces. Shaggy had been expecting the Legion tab to do something. Vlad held up a hand, though. His eyes still had that faraway look of someone messing with an in-game window. Hold up. Vlad said. I still have to choose a few things since I was the one who activated it. Do we want a single leader? Or do we want to keep the co-leader arrangement we kind of have already? Are those our only options? Shaggy asked as he pulled a credit chip from his bag and moved to the terminal. They were going to have to upload everything they had to get this place built. Even if it was just the generic system bot stuff, at least they would have better defenses. Well, we could do a council of founding members. We could all do our own thing, but every game decision would have to be agreed to by the leaders. We would also have to structure our lackeys into groups under each leader. But if we don't want them, we throw them back into the pool. So we would all have our own little sections. Ren nodded. I like that. We each run our own little groups, but then come together for big jobs. Then we go out and do some villainy. Dave cheered. I am so amped for all of this. I am going to raise my lackeys right. We're going to go on runs, train every day, help the citizenry. Hassle the citizenry. Actually, that's a good idea, Dave. Shaggy chuckled, still plugging chips into the terminal. I hereby dub you head of PR. It's your job to make our organization look good. Help old ladies cross the street, rescue dogs from trees, get rid of the local riffraff. Vlad and the others chuckled as Dave's grin got even bigger. We'll do the dark stuff. You just keep being you. Vlad said. But I like the idea of each of us creating specialized lackeys. That's kind of what we wanted to do anyway, right? I mean, Ephemera and I were going to be head of the spies. Slink nodded. Okay. Let's go with a council and get this over with. We don't know how long it's going to take for those blade bots to get here. Vlad nodded. Done. As he did, the holodisplay they were looking at shimmered a bit before it grew bright and filled out. Soon, several options appeared at different sections of the bar. Options for wooden floors and tables, as well as options for new rooms and tools for those rooms. Shaggy blinked as he tried to take it all in. In the upper corner of the display were several icons, followed by some numbers. Is that our resources? Shaggy asked, waving at the images. There were light blue silhouettes of people, stacks of wood, metal, and even credits displayed, and Shaggy was sure he was right. Ran and the others nodded as Vlad seemed to still be scrolling through menus. The number of metal went up, suddenly surprising everyone. Slink moved to the office door to see what was going on, and he laughed excitedly. It's one of those omegas. That old guy NPC moved it in here, and he's studying it. I guess it counts as a resource, right? What do we do with it? We spend them on building stuff. Vlad said, waving a hand. Also, it looks like we get a discount for having a professional builder. We can have this place up and running in no time. Shaggy grinned as he plugged the last credit chip into the terminal and transferred the money to the lair. They could go over the rest of the options later. For now, they had to focus on getting the bar set up and ready for the oncoming bots. He turned to Slink and Dave. You two get the lackeys to drag in every bit of metal they can. Vlad, you get this place built out, and please don't make it some dark palace fit for a prince. Shaggy thought he heard Vlad sked as he turned to Ren and continued. You get everyone ready for the next round. We need our people ready, so reload, restock, and tell everyone to prepare. What about you? Vlad asked, as the others moved out. Dave still hopping with excitement. I'll help where I can. But I gotta find some food. Tilani took a lot out of me, not to mention his boys and the bots. I need to be ready for round 2. I might even talk to my werewolf sensei and see if he can impart any wisdom. Easy to find wisdom when you don't have any to start with. Vlad joked. Shut it and get to building us a decent bar. We have a little wood that Blobby managed to get a hold of, but mostly you're going to be working with metal. Vlad cracked his fingers as he shrank the terminal's holodisplay. Oh, don't you worry, Wolfie. This place is going to look amazing when I'm done with it.